John. Thank you, John. Thank you. Um, we have a couple but very important items on our agenda this morning, and we're going to go on and get started. And our first agenda item is flash flood update. Nick Crosley, EMA, is here, and Diana Christie, I believe, is gone. Oh, she's there too. Okay. All right. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I apologize for being right on time, I guess. That's unusual for me. So I just want to provide a quick update where we're at in both receiving information about the flood and an update on where we're at in seeking any state or federal resources that might be available. So as you know, starting about just about 5 o'clock, always a great time for a disaster to happen, 5 o'clock on a Friday, we received an unusually heavy flooding event or rain event in a very concise, small area. And we've seen that, I've been here 11 years, we've seen that happen more than once when we get these extreme rainfalls. And so we started seeing impacts and talking to the Weather Service, Norwood, St. Bernard, but mainly down into Cincinnati, Oakley, Hyde Park, Mountain Lookout, started seeing the reports in the media, as well as reports from first responders in the field about flooding. So unfortunately, we did, as a result of that, as a result of the flooding, one of our residents in the village of Fairfax suffered an electrocution and passed away. And then we had a couple of other injuries. So always unfortunate, and my heart goes out to people who suffer at that level, and all the people that have been impacted by this flooding event. So I like to show this slide just to show people how quickly these events escalate. So it was a really crazy time. You know, it started raining about 3:15. We're cruising along. And then just right before 5 o'clock, the heavy rain started happening. 20 minutes later, the flood advisory was issued, which is, again, just a heads up to our residents that if you haven't noticed, there's lots of rain coming down. We're probably going to have a flood. At 5:30, a flash flood warning is issued, and that's when a wireless emergency alert is sent out by the National Weather Service. So the Weather Service handles all weather-related wireless emergency alerts. We handle the other ones for man-made events, so to speak. And then just a few minutes after that, at 5:44, they upgraded it to a considerable flood event, or flash flood event, which is we're seeing known impacts. This is a dangerous event. You saw the flooding on the interstates and other stuff that was happening. So that's when that went out to basically, there we go. That was the size of the flooding event, the warning that they sent out. So obviously this is a little bit larger than what was actually flooding. But as you saw from the media pictures, Mount Lookout Square, Hyde Park Square, in the Oakley area, the Duck Creek area, as well as Interstate 71. So I've seen this type of flooding on Interstate 75, unfortunately, and this time it was on Interstate 71, which finally brought traffic to standstill for quite a while. Until basically, I don't think it was a drain issue. I think we had to wait for the water to recede. And that unfortunately caught people stuck on the interstate during the event. Communities impacted that we can determine, I think there were spots around, but in general, the communities we saw were Cincinnati, Fairfax, Madeira, Norwood, St. Bernard, and Silverton. So I know that I personally, in my time here, have dealt with multiple issues, and obviously in the city of Cincinnati, Norwood and St. Bernard, and then to see impacts to Fairfax. I know I was talking to their police chief yesterday. This is not an unknown issue in the village of Fairfax around the creek that runs through there. And then, of course, Silverton had some issues as well. So as far as the Emergency Management Agency, so we coordinate and provide sort of external resources as requested by our communities. So obviously I was notified immediately that there was a flash flood event. I coordinated with the county administrator, who then notified the Board of County Commissioners to let them know this event was going on. We were in, at that point, emergency response mode with all of our communities. So it was a lot of rescues, stalled vehicles, that kind of thing. I know personally talking to the city of Cincinnati's commander, it was a bit of a crazy time for about an hour, hour and a half, couple of hours. We then notified the basically all of our partners that this event's going on pay attention, including the state of Ohio. We sent out a sit rep later that evening about 7 o'clock, sort of letting people know, here's what we know so far. Again, the reason for this is we have both governmental partners, so from the engineer to planning and development that help in these kind of disaster responses, but also we have an extensive voluntary network of organizations, the Hamilton County Community Organizations Active in Disasters, or COAD, that we let know that this is going on and we may need your assistance as the event unfolds. We contact we generally work through the fire departments in all of our communities as their emergency management liaison, and we contact them all via cell and email to touch base and ask, how can we help? So we have resources both from planning and development as well as the engineer, emergency management. We handle a lot of the mass care requests. And at that time, there were no known unmet needs. We did briefly try to contact the Corps of Engineers on the Madisonville gate, floodgate, which you're all aware of. They're testing today as we speak. Madison Road is closed at the gate. We did have we could not get a hold of the Corps. Wouldn't have made any difference anyway from an immediate standpoint, but we're working on making sure we can reach them in a timely fashion. It turns out that while we have some Corps dams in Hamilton County, which is the office out of Louisville, the gates, which this is actually owned by the city of Cincinnati, they did build it, but it's owned by the city of Cincinnati and has been for several years. That arm of the Corps is out of Huntington, West Virginia. So you can see it gets a little confusing with the Corps of Engineers, who covers what. But we've clarified those lines of communication at this point. Again, we contacted all communities at least once a day, if not multiple times a day, to make sure that they understood we are ready, willing, and able to provide assistance should you need it. We did not need any, there was no request for any sheltering or any other mass care supplies due to the nature of the event. And then we ended up activating our COAD and worked with our volunteers to work with the city of Cincinnati this past Saturday and did some neighborhood walking to see if there were any unmet needs that these volunteers could help people with. So that's just a successful deployment of a system. I know Commissioner Summer-Odumas and I have talked about this several times. It's just really important. I realized, I already knew there were a lot of nonprofits in Hamilton County. I realized how many nonprofits there are that can assist, both during the pandemic, when we helped a lot of them with pandemic supplies during the pandemic. As we continue, so where we're at today is we are continuing with our damage assessment process. Obviously, with your smaller communities, a much quicker process. I'll talk about that in a second. In our larger communities, a little bit more complicated as we move through trying to figure out the level of damage in our communities. And I just want to remind everyone and those viewers that are watching, so when you're asking for a state or federal declaration, FEMA has standards that can at least allow you to request a federal declaration. The state then mirrors those standards. You just have to meet it at the county level. But again, the level of damage just allows you to request the declaration. It's up to either the governor or the president to then declare that emergency. And so a lot of times, and we found this in 2016 when we had that unfortunate flood event as well, affected is just minor cosmetic damage. So that's 3 or 4 inches in the basement, that kind of thing. Minor, you have low-level structural water harm, but it's under 18 inches, but it does reach the first floor, which is a challenging event since most of our homes in Hamilton County have basements, including my own. By FEMA terms, which then by state terms, they do not consider basements an affected area or a reason for a declaration if it's not a primary living space. So a primary living space would be, we have lots of garden apartments, as we call them, in Hamilton County and northern Kentucky and the area around here. So that would be a primary living space. So a lot of times we find out in these flooding events that when it comes to consideration for federal or state assistance, basements are generally not relevant to that discussion. They're relevant to the people impacted. I know my basement is finished, and I would rather it not flood. But in the declaration process, they are excluded. Major, when you have severe structural or high water lines, so really 18 to 24 inches of water has to get into the first floor of the structure. And then, of course, destroyed is self-explanatory. So, for example, In Norwood, there used to be a skating rink that was literally destroyed during that flooding event in 2016. That was an example of a pretty right skating rink, a very popular skating rink back in the day, so to speak. But so that's and this is basically these are the guidelines we get for individual assistance. Now, when you're seeking a declaration, I've had several since I've been here, a few since I've been here, and got here in 2015. You have the public assistance side, which is the government side of assistance. That threshold to request a declaration today is you have to, without a major infrastructure loss, is pretty hard to get to. That has increased about $700,000 since 2016. And then with individual assistance, which is the assistance we're talking about today, you have to have 25 majors are destroyed. And so the difference is when you have a tornado and you can literally do a flyover and you can see that the damaged or destroyed houses, fairly easy to conduct that damage assessment. It's very clear damage. When it comes to flooding, that's a lot more, and this is what Cincinnati's been doing, it, but plus our other communities, they walk the streets and they go door to door in some cases to determine the level of damage, especially if you can't. Sometimes we can see it on the outside of the home. We can see the water line, and we then document that water line. But if they can't see it, then they're attempting to contact residents to find out the level of damage. So today, Cincinnati's is still ongoing. I was in communication with them yesterday, seeking that data. Fairfax, the village administrator in Fairfax, coordinated their damage assessment in Fairfax. They had 2 majors, 1 home and 1 business, so that's 18 to 24 above the first floor. 14 minors and 1 affected. So in that, what will count toward having a determination made by the state on what they seek are the major destroyed. We have received no other community reports, so probably basement level flooding. We do review the reports from MSD, and we share that with the communities just to see if it's applicable to the event. We share those with the public officials. And then the full scope is still being assessed. So that we hope to submit this week. So basically we get the data from the communities. The state recently changed their system. We're still working on an integrated system to connect with their system. But we then hand enter that information into the state's damage assessment portal. And then we work with them on a determination on whether or not we can seek state or federal assistance through the official disaster process. Once they're completed, we enter it. Then if we get 25 majors, then we request the disaster declaration, more than likely at this point at the state level. But if we don't get it, then we would be declined for at least that level of federal or state assistance. There may be other programs that I don't know about, but through the emergency management process, this will be the determination. So the future, so obviously we maintain a countywide hazard mitigation plan. The number 1 hazard in Hamilton County is flooding and flash flooding, hands down, just because of the level of damage, oftentimes the uninsured nature of the damage, and the financial impact to our residents. So the number 1 hazard all of our communities are constantly trying to mitigate is flooding. So we'll make sure this event is incorporated into that plan. We will then, over the next year or so, be conducting and sending out, we like to try to reach out to the residents of Hamilton County and say, what concerns you? How prepared are you? And what would you like to see happen, so we can document that and share that with our communities. And again, we coordinate this plan. It's federally required to have a hazard mitigation plan for every municipality in the United States. And so we do that at the county level to make it easier on our communities. We aggregate that data to the county level, down to the community level, and then each community has priorities listed in the plan. So the current plan is on our website, and then we will update this in time for, I believe, 2028. But we have to start the process now. We were doing the planning update internally. Normally we work with a contractor. That funding mechanism through the federal government, through their mitigation funds, has been removed by the administration. I have asked to the FEMA administrator and sent a follow-up email yesterday to FEMA to ask for reconsideration of that, to allow that to a plan update to be an allowable grant application. Either way it goes, we are responsible for it, and it will be done on time and thoroughly. And then we'll work with our community's infrastructure. We've had several emails back and forth with residents and local communities about what funding might be available. There is funding available through the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, or BRIC. That money can be used for flood mitigation projects and the hazard mitigation grant program. I will say that these programs often require a 25% match of some kind, which again is still a good deal if we can get one of these. These are multi-million-dollar grants, but they do require, all of these mitigation efforts require, but they're long-term projects, both from the planning stage, the application stage, and then the implementation stage. And so, but we will be, I know I've been talking to Holly, Assistant Administrator Chrisman, about this. We will be engaging with other relevant partners in the county to start talking about, and the state, to talk about how do we get into these programs and how do we focus our applications to try to make them successful. And that is my update.
Thank you so much, Nick, for reiterating some of the information that Commissioner Driehaus and I attended the EMA meeting yesterday, and so got a lot of our questions answered, but may have more. Could you please repeat the acronym BRIC for those that are listening so they can understand exactly what that's?
Yeah, so it's Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, the BRIC program.
You don't have to repeat that whole thing.
Well, it's a fascinating program because basically the premise of the funding of it is it's basically a percentage of the annual amount the United States, the federal government spends on disasters every year. So I say it in a good year, which is an unfortunate year, lots of disasters, that fund could total billions of dollars in available funding. At a minimum, it totals hundreds of millions of dollars, but it is a nationwide competitive grant process, which is why working with our partners who are used to writing these grants. I know that we've worked with MSD in the past on hazard mitigation grants to do home buyouts along flooded areas. A lot of them are familiar with how to fill out these grants and hopefully make ourselves in a competitive spot to receive this money.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I'll open it up for questions for Nick, and then we'll talk to Diana because she has a whole different aspect. But my concern right now, of course, I'm sure everybody's concern, is the short-term and long-term solutions. You can't just take money and put it, that's just a Band-Aid. So I've been getting emails, and I'm sure my colleagues have, from other entities that are saying, are you going to help St. Bernard? What other entities are you going to help? So we need to have, or the city needs to have a plan on how they're going to not only select, but distribute the money that they say they're going to distribute. So I'll open it up, Vice President Reese.
Thank you very much. I wanted to talk about the alert because me and my staff, we were at the Von Hill Central Campus, and of course it was raining. Get in the car. Soon as we got to the light to turn right on Reading Road,
Yep.
And I live in that community in Roselawn, it was like when the alert came on, we were already almost underwater. Of course, thank God I didn't get on Norwood Lateral, which I could get on and get quicker, a little quicker to my house, but I decided to take Reading Road because, I thought, it'd be better. When we got on Reading Road, a lot of people don't know it dips down. You get to Roseland. The water came up to almost to the top of my door. Now, people who had SUVs was in a better shape, and it came so quick. So it was like the alert, and then you're almost underwater. My question is, how does those alerts work? Because I think for me, the alerts came once Norwood Lateral was almost underwater. I'm sure the East Side Oakley, and then the Reading Road component.
Well, and that's a great question. So you're talking about alerting from the National Weather Service. So if you look back at the timeline that they were working with, basically heavy rain begins at 4:55, 5:18, so 20 minutes later. It starts to come in both from readings they're getting from the community as well as they're measuring from radar atmospheric conditions. And then just a few minutes later, it's even increased so much more. And I think at the end of the day, it's Mother Nature. It's really unfortunate. I think for our residents out there, and I always preach, if you will, I know sometimes I preach, is to be weather aware, right? So, for example, when we know that there's going to be a heavy event or we start to see an elevated risk level, we email every community and every elected official. We have a huge email list that we send out and say, here's what's going to happen. Need to be weather aware and pay attention. I think the challenge is always going to be when you're, and I've always been afraid of this, you're on the open road, so to speak, and you don't realize, you see the rain and you know it's raining hard, but you don't realize necessarily at that time that an area is going to flood that fast. And I think that is both the nature and the danger of flash flooding, which is why they send it out. And I think the reality is, much like you saw the people on I-71 get caught in it as well, it's all of a sudden you're driving along and you don't realize the dip is coming or that it's not draining fast enough and you just get stuck. And that's unfortunate. I don't know that there's an answer to it. I think the biggest thing we can all do is be continuously weather aware. But I think in these instances where you have these, for lack of a better way to put it, freak events, where even the Weather Service, when I looked at the forecast for that day, when I went back and looked at the forecast for that day, it was actually really similar to what they were calling for last night, which is, yeah, it's going to rain. We don't expect anything major. And then boom. And I think that is just something we just have no control over. It's basically what our insurance carriers call an act of God. And so I think the best thing we can do is make sure you can get alert on the phones. And if it does happen, and if your phone goes off, it means you've been geolocated, is to pull over as soon as possible and just stop and then assess the risk of continuing. And that's what I would tell any resident who was caught in it. I know when I'm driving down the interstate and I get to where I can't see in the rain, I just, will sometimes pull over to the side or pull over the far lane, put my hazards on, and drive more slowly. So I think it's just always a challenge we're going to face.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned we haven't seen anything like it. I remember, like you said, Norwood. It was Fun Factory skating rink, legendary skate rink that got destroyed. My other question, I do think we do need to have some tips on things like this because it seems like it may occur. Do you drive? Do you not drive? It was nowhere to pull over. I finally found a used car lot that let me pull over in it, and then the used car lot came out and said, "We closing for the day. You got to get back out there." So we need to know, should you continue? I want to get something that can give some kind of guide to people. Should you continue to drive? Do you open your door? Because it'll destroy your car. How do you make sure your car doesn't, someone died. This is not just, let's pull over and let it blow over. Everything was flooded, and does it tear up your car? What do you do when you're caught? Now, obviously, if you're at the house and it's about to be a flash flood warning, stay in the house.
Right.
But I've seen people with boats trying to get out the house and trying to save their children, their pets, those kind of things. We need to get some tips, like we have tips on other things, on what is it that you should do. Because honestly, I did get, Mr. Little did text us, but by the time he got it and got to me, I'm down in the flood.
Yeah.
I couldn't open the door. Do I still keep going? Those kinds of things I think would be helpful. The other thing I wanted to hit on is insurance. Are these covered? Is cars covered? Is houses covered? Is small business covered? What tips to people out here that got their properties destroyed?
So, not being an expert, I think generally feeling your car is probably covered, so that you sort of have generic insurance on your car. With homeowners and business insurance, so there's obviously through just thinking of my own home, I can get a small amount of coverage through my private policy. It's not cheap. I'm also not in a floodway. There's the National Flood Insurance Program that insures up to $250,000 for residential structures and up to, I think, $500,000 for commercial. I think that everyone should evaluate their level of risk. FEMA.gov, you can go and you can enter your address and figure out if you're in a floodplain or not. Plus, speaking honestly, we probably know if you live in Hamilton County whether or not you're in a flood-prone area, and consider the flood insurance. There's also, I know I had this on mine, backup insurance. So we're fortunate to have a backup program in Hamilton County if it's caused by a sewer issue versus a stormwater or overland issue. But also evaluating, do I need this? And then, of course, for businesses, talking over with their agent business interruption insurance. So if they're delayed opening and they want to pull the trigger on that policy, so if it's a couple of days, maybe you don't, but otherwise consider business interruption insurance. And I'd be negligent if I didn't mention, if you listen to the national chatter on emergencies and disasters, there's a huge push by the federal government right now to push off a lot of the risk to private sector, trying to get insurance companies to take over. NFIP, I think, will always be funded just because it is what it is. But you got two major, you've got that and earthquakes, right? And so in California, we had a big earthquake. It's a state-funded program, and then with the NFIP. So you need to consider that, get with your agent, figure out if you're in a floodplain, and because they're pushing more responsibility onto individuals, for better or for worse, and also states and local governments. So you'll see, I think, if the changes that have been proposed come to fruition, you will see a higher threshold for us to be able to get assistance. So we as residents of Hamilton County need to be better prepared, and we need to accept our risk and try to mitigate it as best we can.
Gotcha. And I would say it's for worst. If it's
Yes.
going to be pushed to the local people who are barely making it right now.
Yep.
A small business gets hit. I mean, they don't have all this extra money.
That's right.
The Mayor Aftab in Cincinnati issued a declaration of emergency. Is that, and you just mentioned like some of the declarations is that a different declaration? Because like you said, Fairfax, Madeira, Norwood, St. Bernard, and Silverton, did the governor also do it? Did they fall under that, or how does that work?
So declarations at the city and the county or even the village level are generally internal processes. So if we'd had a major public infrastructure event, or if we'd had to move county employees to help with community response, we can declare a disaster. The mayor, same thing, the mayor declares a state of emergency. It's really an internal. I think you've seen some quotes on that where he talks about the impact of that declaration. It's really trying to make the city more flexible if need be. It increases a little bit of purchasing power, nothing huge. It's not a game changer. Most things still have to go to the elected bodies to do. But it's really an internal document. And you actually, to me, a city and a county declaration are twofold, or three. One is the internal processes that change, which there's a few that it changes, for example, within the county structure. The other is letting the residents know that we see the impacts of this event, and we are declaring a state of emergency so that we are then notifying the state that we have an emergency in Hamilton County. But it is not needed technically for the governor to issue a state of declaration for Hamilton County if we meet the thresholds that their program has. So I think that's always, it's confusing to people when they see, different levels issue a declaration. But I know here, when we start seeing huge impacts to our residents, I don't think it's a bad idea to have a discussion about a declaration, and then it just notifies the state that, hey, I know we've had a pretty big event, but we need you to know that we've had a pretty big event. And then the governor makes their declaration. Generally speaking, they follow the program rules. Obviously, there's some elected discretion there if the governor wanted to do something, but that's up to the governor. And the governor himself, in almost all themselves, makes that determination themselves.
Gotcha.
Based on the data.
Gotcha. Based on the information that you just gave, I would be in support of some declaration because, of course, Cincinnati, but we got Fairfax, Madeira, Norwood, St. Bernard, and Silverton. So I would be interested if that is a possibility so that the governor doesn't move past any of the areas that's been impacted. And then lastly, I would ask the administrator to also you to work with our Office of Small Business. There's a lot of small businesses that got destroyed that are struggling, and to see if there's some connection and help that the Office of Small Business can direct them to what might be available to help them. So that's to get the two of you working together, I think would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nick, what is the status of the governor as it relates to state of emergency? Has he made any decisions about?
No, they are waiting on the data. So basically, within a few days of this happening, I'd already talked to the state, but then they sent us their standard email about damage assessment. So we're just waiting on the data.
Commissioner Dreehouse?
Thank you. Thank you. And I, too, was going to ask about the resolution. Is it your recommendation that we do it just in case we were to meet the threshold? I mean, I know the threshold is very high and getting higher, but we don't know how much damage is out there. And so it wouldn't hurt to do it. We don't want to raise expectations to say that we will likely get that, because I do think it's unlikely, but it wouldn't hurt to do it, right?
Correct.
So, all right. So I too would support that resolution, maybe at an on Thursday or at an upcoming meeting. I wanted to hone in on some of this collaborative work that we can do with the city and with the other jurisdictions in the county that are also flood prone. I remember coming back from a NACO conference a couple years ago after I had spoken with the EPA about some grant funding that was available, and I had asked that individual at the federal level, hey, if we were to apply for these dollars, what does that look like? And what if we did it jointly? The city of Cincinnati through MSD, stormwater, county stormwater, EMA, all applied together. And they said there would be an advantage to that, obviously, because we're doing it together. And so we had a meeting, it's been a while back, with all those organizations to try to understand if we can better collaborate by way of pulling down some federal dollars for these really, really large remediation projects. So what I'm talking about, and as Commissioner Dumas said, there's the short term and then there's the long term. And I feel like you're more focused on the long term. I think Diana's going to give us more information on the short term. But this long term piece is important because people are looking to us to recognize where the hot spots are, which we know, and try to remediate some of this flooding. And we've done some of that with our ARPA dollars in the past, with one-time dollars, and we've spent millions of dollars in some of our communities trying to do just this. Norwood comes to mind, where we just put that huge retention basin in through the board allocation of ARPA dollars, and it worked. And those properties didn't get flooded in that neighborhood. So we know there are strategies. It's just, it costs millions of dollars to put them in place. And so if we can apply for the BRIC dollars in collaboration with one another, I think, I'm going to ask Holly in a minute for just an update on how that's going, because I know there are some meetings that are collaborative between the city and the county, trying to understand how we can do better or just more, I guess, and pulling down some federal resources, because to rely on either the city or the county to do these $1 million projects is not entirely realistic without some help from the federal government. I think the match is something we can think about, but the projects, as I said, are millions of dollars. So I'm looking forward to that in hope that, and Holly, I'm going to ask Holly to come up after Diana's presentation because there's more to come. But really feel like we need to get more aggressive with the federal grant dollars and do it in collaboration with the city and the county. So I just want to put that out there. But I appreciate the work that you and your team have done. We got a very robust update yesterday at the EMA meeting. I know you're trying to do your best alerting people as to what's happening, but it is tricky when we've got these weather events that are happening, these 1,000-year storms that are happening every 10 years, right? It's just crazy, and we need to be able to respond to that. And I think some of this remediation is the answer to our communities to say, what are y'all doing about these frequent flooding events? And the answer to that is trying to pull down federal resources so that we can do some remediation. So appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Diana, if you'd like to come up. And the infrastructure that was mentioned earlier in Norwood, that was about $3.4 million just for one area in Norwood. So we're talking about big money. Diana, I'll let you do your presentation and have some questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Dumas, and thank you all for having us here today. I'm going to go through the storm response and our SBU program response, and then I'm going to also have Reese Johnson, our chief engineer, come up, and he's going to talk a bit more about the engineering analysis and get into that discussion about solutions. So try to speed through this somewhat quicker. So I want to start by noting that we're talking about that really big storm on Friday, July 17th, but we've really had kind of an unprecedented summer with a number of pretty significant storm events that we've been responding to in June and July. And this is really, yes, we have rain events and we have storms every summer, but it does appear to be a somewhat unprecedented series of them that's come in quick succession, and that has additional impacts as well. So starting with, and I'm not going to go all the way back to all of them, but really just 3 that we've had recently. Didn't have time to add last night, although I don't think it was that bad. But July 11th, we had a storm that you can see kind of was a wider swath of the of our service area of Hamilton County, hitting the west side the hardest, with over 25-year, and we'll talk about what those things mean in a bit, but up to 100-year storm on that certain area of the west side. The July 17th storm, I think the most interesting thing when you look at this is just how isolated it was and the significant intensity in that spot right there, that part of the city of Cincinnati, Norwood, St. Bernard, that were just hit so hard that it actually tops, that 1,000-year storm interval in that area, and also how much of the county really wasn't receiving any rain at all. So very unpredictable and very difficult to prepare for. And then on the 21st, so that was last Tuesday, and we saw, something a little bit more widespread here, but again, hitting some of the same areas that were hit by the prior 2 storms. And I wanted to speak a little bit about that, especially on the 17th and the 21st. You're hitting our urban areas that are very dense. We do not have a lot of green space. We have a lot of structures, a lot of hard paved roads, and there really is just nowhere for the stormwater to go. Then you add to that the succession of rain events where our ground is saturated, so the little bit of green space we have also doesn't do a very good job of soaking up any rainwater, if it could, when it's falling that quickly. So actually, let me just generally speaking, again, the 17th was the largest, unprecedented by far, comparable to what we saw in 2016. But in all of these, the impacts that we see when we start to get that flash flooding, and that's the first thing we see, and it can be very dangerous and very destructive. That flash flooding is happening because the rain is falling quicker than it can be drained through any of the storm inlets, either in the streets or near your home. And just as a reminder, the storm infrastructure and the stormwater conveyance is not MSD's jurisdiction. So that infrastructure generally is, in the city of Cincinnati, it's the stormwater utility, and outside the city of Cincinnati, it's your local jurisdiction. And those systems were overwhelmed. So when you get this much rain, you first see a lot of flooding and the impacts that can have. It then does, get into our combined sewer system, and the area of impacts, again, especially on the 17th, was in that part of our city and county where we have combined sewers. So that stormwater is all rushing then into our combined sewer system and overwhelming the system, which means it's surcharging, it's overflowing where it can. That can come out of manholes, it can come out in people's homes and businesses through sewer backups, and it also results in combined sewer overflows to our rivers and streams. So, and we have said, and I want to repeat, that the MSD sewer system, in these recent events, didn't fail. These aren't operational issues. These aren't failures to maintain it. The system is simply overwhelmed. In other words, it is not designed to convey that much stormwater, over that time period. And the stormwater is mixed with wastewater once it gets into our system, so those overflows happen. But it is a capacity issue. It is not an operational issue when it comes to our sewer system. We do, of course, and what I want to talk about, have our SBU program. So MSD's sewer backup program is something that is set forth in our consent decree. And the sewer backup program provides a response and compensation program, essentially, that MSD, and I'm going to get into the components of it, that we, that is available to homeowners or businesses when they have the backup of wastewater into their home or business through the public sewer. What's happening when we have these rain events is that backup is caused by what we would call inadequate capacity of the public sewer, per our consent decree, that just means that it's overwhelmed. It doesn't mean that we could design or we could solve the problem with larger sewers necessarily. So Reese is going to talk a little bit more about that, but it's just important to note that when we say that the sewer backup was caused by a lack of capacity, that doesn't necessarily mean that we could have that capacity just by designing a larger sewer, for example. We also provide services when there's a blockage in the public sewer. It's not really what's been happening during these events, so I'm really focused on the capacity issue. And I did, if you see these QR codes on here, what I'm going to talk about next, the components of our program, I'm going to go through kind of quickly, but we have a lot of information on our website, and I'd really encourage people to go to the website and go through each one of these areas if you have been impacted, so that you understand the timeline and the process if you've reported a backup to us. I'll start, though, with these are the main components of the program, and just to give people an idea of what took place on these recent events. So again, we were already, had been responding to, a large number of calls prior to the 17th. The 17th came in. We of course had all hands on deck trying to answer calls, intake the reports that were coming in online, and we were putting out information. We wanted people to report to us, but I do know that for the few days immediately following the event, people did have some trouble getting through. We encouraged them to get on to our online system. But the most important, first step is for when there is a impact to your home or business to report that to us as soon as possible through one of these methods. So that is, by phone or online. Based on the July 17th, which really kind of bled into the 21st, we received a total of 1,800, little over 1,800 reports, so 1,860 as of yesterday. Those numbers have been changing because people have been reporting, and we've been taking those calls, even though it's a bit past the rain event at this point in time. When you report a sewer backup to us, the next step is that we will send a crew out to investigate. When we have an event of this magnitude, we may not actually go into your home. We don't always need to. So we were, in the immediate aftermath that weekend and on Monday, really trying to figure out how to get crews out faster. Again, we had all hands on deck. We had, up to 16 or 18 crews, and these are MSD employees, out on the streets, working overtime, using all the daylight hours to try to conduct these investigations. But obviously, we were reaching the thousands quickly, and we couldn't keep up. So one of the things we did was we wanted to make determinations, for multiple addresses at the same time. So really trying to triage those calls, have our crews go out and investigate. For instance, if they can go out onto a street and they're able to, what we look at is the public sewer, looking at the manholes, looking for signs of surcharge. And once it's evident that our sewer there was at exceeded capacity and there are signs of surcharging, then we authorized all the properties in that segment for cleaning. So we made determinations on eligibility on a bit wider scale. And that really, enabled us to get through those a little bit quicker last week and finally, get through any that came in. Again, we've still had some trickling in, and with the second event, we aren't complete, but we're down to, a few dozen, I think, that we're still responding to. So the investigation step, I think we also heard from customers, whether they were calling us or calling you all, that they felt that we hadn't been out there yet. So we really wanted to, and I want to, explain to people that you may not have seen us, but we did investigate. If you were authorized for cleaning, the next step is that a customer service representative from MSD will call you to schedule cleaning. So what this is a service then we need your permission, because now we're going to send a contractor out to your home. They're going to schedule that. We're going to schedule that, and they're going to come out to your home, and they're going to begin cleaning and remediation of that property. And we have to have authorization to do that. So that is really the step we're in right now. Is we've approved a lot, and we've contacted most of our customers. There are some that choose to decline those cleaning services. They've either done it on their own or they want to hire someone on their own. But those that we need to schedule, we're in the process of doing that. We've completed a lot. I don't have the exact numbers today, but we are in this process right now, and we just want to continue to encourage people that is something that we're doing as quickly as possible. The companies that then come in, they're going to also dispose of damaged property, and that will all need to be documented for the claims process, which is the last step. So the reimbursement of damages is something that if you were authorized for cleaning, that information will be provided to you, information about how to file a claim. We have an online form. You can go onto our website and complete that. You can complete a paper form and mail that in. There is a lot of information about what is eligible for coverage under our program. I think the most important thing to let people know is that the damages need to be inside your home. That's what is covered under the SBU program. And we have documentation as required about insurance, whether you can be a renter, and if you're the property owner or the renter, that will make a difference in terms of what you can apply for in terms of the real property damage versus the personal property. But we not only do we have a lot of information on our website about this, we also have our customer service folks who are happy to take calls and talk people through the claims process. You do have up to 2 years after the event to file a claim, so this doesn't have to be done immediately. And we know it takes a bit of work for folks to do this and get their documentation together. In addition to the help that we can provide, there's also an ombudsman for the SBU program. I apologize, I did not put the number on one of these slides, but I think it's on just about every page of our website. If you're looking at any of the SBU information, there's always the ombudsman link. So that is support that's provided through the legal system to help people with the claims process. Jenny has it, thank you. So now I need to get my glasses out. So it's a tiny, tiny print at the bottom there. I would like to read this just because it is very important. The ombudsman again is assistance that's provided through the consent decree. They are the Legal Aid Society of Greater Cincinnati. But the phone number is 513-362-2801. So if you're unable to get a hold of us, really anywhere you are in the process, but especially for the claims process because there's a little bit more work involved, they're an additional resource. We work directly with them, and they can provide assistance to individuals who need that. So let me talk a bit about where we are. Again, those numbers, as I said, we've been working around the clock really since the 17th. We had about 1,860 claims as of yesterday. I'm sorry, not claims, calls to our system. So these are reports of a sewer backup. We have completed nearly all of them. I think we were down to under 50 yesterday. And we had authorized, of those 1,860, we had authorized 940 for cleaning. So, a little, about 50%. And the properties that are not authorized, this gets back to what are we seeing and why are we saying they're not eligible for the sewer backup program. Typically, what we're seeing is that their property was solely impacted by overland flooding, water's getting into their home. We have a lot of properties in our area that, have recessed drives. They're on it, they're sitting in an area where the entire area was flooded. If we did see any signs of surcharge along with that overland flooding, even if most of the damage or most of the impact was from the flooding, they would qualify. So we had to, really have information that indicated that the sewers weren't surcharged if you were not approved for cleaning. So we have been, letting customers know that, and they can call if they have not heard if they were eligible for cleaning. But if they have not heard from us, then they likely were not approved for our program, and then they will not be eligible to file a claim either. So I put this slide up. This is mostly information about the budget and what is covered with our 2026 SBU program budget. So the board approved a little over $8 million for 2026. This has been based on, really the last few years of program spending. one of the large components of the program that we have not been talking about yet is the prevention program. This is where properties that have 2 or more backups caused by a capacity-related issue are eligible for a prevention solution. These are, we work directly with property owners if they are eligible, and we design and construct and install a prevention device on their property. It includes, reconfiguration of plumbing and all sorts of things. So it's a pretty involved process. This year, we have been a little bit lower on that side of the budget than we typically are. We just haven't had as many properties in that program in 2026 that are moving through construction, which is a costly expense. So at this time, as you can see through June, we had spent $3.4 million of our $8.2 million budget. So we were able to, direct the funding, the resources we needed to this immediate response to make sure that our cleaning contractors had funding to go out and, conduct the work that we need immediately. But it is our projection now that that cleaning work, really just based on the number that we've authorized from this event, over 900, is going to, put us in a position where we'll need additional funding for the SBU program in 2026. So we're going to, in the next few weeks, be, trying to get a better idea of that. We really don't know when the claims will come in. We know that the claims with this event will also be a large expense, larger than we've had in past years. But again, customers have 2 years after an event to file a claim, so that will really be, probably some will start to come in this year, but we can see that increased expense over the next 2 years, as claims come in and are processed and we offer payment. So a bit too early for me to give you those numbers, but I do know that we're expecting that the cost of this response is going to exceed the remainder of the budget. So if I could, I'd like to turn it over to Reese before we take questions, because he's going to talk about what all this means from an engineering standpoint, and then we can talk big picture, if that's okay.
I'd like to ask you
Yes.
a couple questions. You were saying 2 years to file a claim, but there was like a 72-hour window that they had to contact you. Can you explain that?
Yes. So it's actually 48 hours. So the consent decree requires that you report a sewer backup within 48 hours of discovery. So if you were out of town, or something like that, you still can report it to us. But the expectation is that you report that to us. And if you don't do that, then you won't be eligible for a reimbursement of your damages. Okay. This is something we've talked about in the past where, the challenge is the further out we get from an event. So for example, if someone were to report to us today that they, were impacted on the 17th or the 11th, because we've had so many additional rain events, we really aren't able to, observe what we need to observe to know whether the public sewer was surcharged or not. Okay. Because of the volume of calls that we received, we were still taking calls, really through this past weekend, and doing the best we can, to investigate those. And so, in terms of recognizing that our system was a bit overwhelmed and we were a little behind on taking those calls, we're not going to be as strict about the 48 hours, but there is a limit there in terms of being able to collect the information we need. So that's different than, so the customer then, once they've been approved for that cleaning, we give them the information about the claim. They don't have to send us that claim form in with all their documentation for 2 years. Okay. 2 years after the event.
I wanted people to hear that there is a timeliness as far as contacting you guys. And then I don't know if Nick is still here, but I was going to ask you, Diana, on the damage assessment that we're waiting on from the city of Cincinnati. Are you involved? Who's all involved in making that assessment? Because we're sitting here today saying about a possible resolution, state of emergency, and we don't even have information from the city of Cincinnati. So I'm wondering who is involved in the damage assessment.
So to be clear, MSD, through our SBU program, we are not doing damage assessments. Okay. And when we're investigating whether a sewer backup occurred, we do most of that investigation outside the home. If we needed to, if we could go inside the home we are given permission. But even if we do go inside the home, those crews are trained to be looking for, impact and whether the public sewer backed up in the home. They're really not there to assess damages that occurred. That's in our program, occurs through the claims process. They submit information and then we do a verification of what was damaged. So the city, my understanding is any damage assessments they're conducting is another department of the city. MSD is not involved in that. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. So basically, we work to train the Building and Inspections Department with the City of Cincinnati.
Okay.
So they are the ones that have been out there since last Saturday, gathering the impacts. And so we do anticipate hopefully getting that data today or tomorrow.
That was my question. When do we plan on getting it? Thank you. I appreciate it. And Diana, we were saying most of the flooding was due to combined sewer systems. What percentage of Hamilton County has combined sewer, would you say?
I cannot think of the percentage off the top of my head. Reese probably.
City of Cincinnati.
Yeah. Yes.
You said 5?
So 85 to 90% inside the city of Cincinnati is
Okay.
combined, and then a few of the
Wow.
other older parts of our city, or of our county, are similar.
85 to 90. Okay.
Within the city of Cincinnati.
I
Yeah.
heard you. Yeah. Yeah, I heard
It's
that.
under 50 if you look
I
at all.
heard that from back there. Yeah. So thank you.
And,
85 to 95. And you said this is similar to a 1,000-year storm. I heard you say that. And even 16 was terrible. So where'd you get that from?
And I would, so I think Reese is going to talk a bit about what those storm intervals mean. So those recurrence intervals, whether or not it's, a 10-year storm, a 50-year storm, have to do with the rainfall intensity, so the volume and the intensity, how quickly it fell. And those are used to make determinations, and they're used in the engineering realm in terms of how we design sewer systems, both combined systems and storm systems. And so, if you look at it more of a probability than the actual, it's not going to happen for 1,000 years. It's more in a year, there's a 1 in 1,000 chance that that area would have that rainfall at that intensity. That gives, I think, people a little more context to what that can mean. But I think Reese is going to try to explain a bit more about what we're seeing and what that means for our system.
Thank you so much. That's all I had for Diana. If you guys had any, or we can move forward to Reese.
I have one question. Going back to the SBU program, you said the budget's $8.2 million, and so far we have spent $3.4 million through June of this year. Do you anticipate this? Because I'm looking at this, it's like before we had this big flash flood, you had 1,726 orders, got the contractor's cost. Hopefully the contractors won't go up. Make sure, and you can talk about that. Want to make sure there's no price gouging going on because our citizens are backs are against the wall right now. So we want to make sure of that. You have prevention program. We only had 73 properties that were contacted. Out of that, I believe, make sure I'm reading this right, only 8 were protected out of the 73. And then you went into professional services, which I don't understand what that was, 128,074. Want to make sure those costs don't run up. Want to make sure we're not taking that the public money is not being taken advantage of, and the people aren't being, because a lot of times you have these disasters, people come in and they we saw it in Dayton, and they come in and they prey on these folks. And I want to make sure they're not doing that to us. But anyway, without this last flash flood, we had 73 that had contacted you, only 8 met the criteria, and $128,000 in professional services cost, and then contracting cost was $881,000, and so that was $1 million. My point is, as we go on, you've got on here MSD SBU labor was $594,473. I'd like to know what you think the labor would be now, and then our cleanup cost was $797,156, and somehow customer service, I don't know what that is. Was that actually doing something? I would hope it is. $840,110. And so when you look at this, you say we're at 3.4 million has been spent, and this is some low numbers. And I'll be honest with you, I think this cost is a little high. Professional services, I want to know what the SBU customer service, maybe it's just worded wrong, but $840,000. And now the phones are ringing off the hook, and we only budgeted 8.2 million. And just with this little bit of helping a few little people, we at 3.4 million. Where do we go from here now that we've got we've got this situation that obviously we didn't think or know it was going to happen? So that leaves us with about a little over $4 million that's available.
That's correct.
Did you want to comment on that? I'm sure you have a better explanation.
Yes, I definitely want to clarify what you're looking at and the numbers here. So to begin with, the first number there, the work orders, that's the number of calls that we had received. So the number of reports to us that we investigated. Through June, those numbers, we had authorized only 222 of that number for our cleaning. So prior to this July event, a lot of the calls we were getting were going to, they appeared to be whether it was a blockage or a private plumbing issue, or they were an overland flooding, so they weren't eligible for our program. So just to clarify that top section. The prevention program, the number of properties contacted means we've determined they're eligible for our program. We reach out to them to see if they're interested. Then they need to work with us to have a solution designed and constructed on their property. That does not, so that the 8 means how many we've completed. It doesn't mean that we've already determined that all 73 of those properties are eligible. It takes some time. Some of them, have information to get back to us. They may not be interested. There's a lot of reasons, but we've determined that 73 are eligible and have been contacted this year, but we've only completed 8 prevention program solutions on properties. So they take up to a year generally to do this work because we're designing a private property solution. Those other costs on that section, the professional services, that's we do engineering design, and we do have professional engineering contractors contracts for that work. So that's that design work for those projects. And then the contractor costs, that's when we're actually in the construction phase. So these are, on property, we're doing construction, we're installing, some kind of pump, typically backflow devices, and doing some other, rerouting and work. So that's those costs. And certainly, that will go up as a result of this event, because a lot of properties have now been approved under our program, and they will become eligible in future years. But for this year, I don't see a lot of increased costs there in that SBU prevention program. The other costs you were pointing at in terms of our labor, so these are MSD personnel costs. So our SBU labor, those are the folks that are going out, the crews that are doing the investigations. That can include overtime in these events. The customer service team, those are our folks that are taking calls and working the phones and doing that customer service. You're correct though. Let's see the other one on there, the cleanup costs. So those are the cleanup contractors. Oh, and I did just want to mention in terms of we have contracts in place. Typically we're entering into 3-year contracts, so our costs are not, we're not in a position right now where we need to go out and get contracts in place and would be subject to that kind of price gouging. However, the costs have been going up a lot. So in this last round, I think we entered into a new contract earlier this year or the end of last year. They went up, I think more than double. And so that's something we've already been looking at and concerned about and trying to figure out how we can, continue to provide these services with those kind of contractor costs going up. But we're not in a position today that we have to go out and hire contractors for this response event because we already have, existing contracts that we utilize. So,
Can you explain to the people that are watching? Because it gets, you're in it every day and you got this area and this person. All they want to know is I came out and all this flooding and the water was brown. Is that under you all, or these people, is this water doesn't fall under MSD? They want to know, what is this brown stuff in my basement? Why was my car underwater? Why did someone die? What is this? Where did this come from? Is this the Madison Road floodgate? Does that fall under you? Does it not fall under you? And I don't want all this brown water. And then people say, oh, this doesn't apply. Does any of this apply to get people some help that was on I-71, that was on the east side in Oakley? Does anything apply does that fall under you, or is that someone else? Not you, but
under MSD, yes. It generally speaking, what you're talking about does not fall under MSD. When you have the rain, the stormwater just completely overwhelmed any kind of system, and again, the stormwater system, the drainage, floodgates, for example, that is not MSD infrastructure, so it is not part of this program, and it is not something that MSD can provide any assistance for. It is part of the overall stormwater, infrastructure or lack of infrastructure that we have in this region. But when you get rainfalls like this, where they're, so much larger than what exists today, you get that flash flooding impacts on the roads, and also that flooding can enter people's homes. So it isn't as simple as, is this water, the water is always going to be dirty. The water is always going to be contaminated in any kind of a flood event, regardless of whether we had a sewer backup or not. So that's never a good indicator of, what caused something, to be flooded. Typically in these major events, what we're seeing is, the streets are flooding first, the areas of pavement or your driveway drains, those are flooding above ground first. Then we are having sewers surcharging. So when you see the manholes, geysering, I mean, we've seen videos of that. And yes, that means that the sewer has surcharge there, but that's not, the water that you are observing on that street or in that, square isn't water that all came out of the sewer. It flooded the street first, then it got into the sewer, and now it's coming back out. So the volume of water is just more intense. It's larger and more intense than anything that we have that can, convey that away. So,
gotcha. That's what I wanted to identify, and I'm hoping at some point we can get to who. That's what the people are asking me. Who do I call? They're taxpayers, ratepayers. They want to know, who do they call to get some relief and some help? And right now, it's not, if it's not MSD, if it's not this group, it's not that group, somebody they've got to be able to call. So we need to work on some kind of joint, here's a phone number, here's who do you call? Because this is going to be happening a little more often, it looks like, than we have ever had to deal with. We just had it, I think, a couple of years ago. The whole river, the water rose, and remember people were on boats on Marion Way, and so we're having it a little more often, and so people want to know what's the answer. So thank you for clarifying that, because people may call you and it doesn't apply. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Diane, I noticed on your sewer backup grid that you had, it might have been good just to put at the top, 2004. At the bottom you have it. Total program expenditures 2004 through 2026. Because I didn't know what that time frame was until I looked all the way down. And we're talking about the $3 million amount for starting from 2004. We're not?
Yes, we are. So let me
saying no?
specify. This is a snapshot of a larger report. The total at the very bottom is the expenditures under the SBU program since 2004, which is when it was created. So that's where you get that 176 million. The area and the numbers I was talking about is just 2026. So in 2026, from January through June, we've spent 3.4 million. And that's what we've spent it on, what's in there. So that line at the very bottom doesn't relate to anything else on that.
So why did we put it there?
So and I apologize. So this is part of a larger report that we have on our website, and I just cut this year's. So we have every year since 2004 this information. So if you go on the website, you can see the full cost, all of the expenditures from 25, 24, 23, 22. So it's a running total because this comes from a larger. So that's just the running total since 2004 at the bottom.
That's what I thought it was, the running total.
It's a running total, but yeah, the amount above it is only 2026 is what I'm
That's
saying.
confusing.
So I apologize for that confusion. Without the larger context of that spreadsheet, it kind of doesn't fit. So,
all righty.
so yeah, if
I'd like to ask a question.
yes. Sorry. I was
Sure.
trying to- Yep.
So thank you for the presentation so far. I wanted to focus on the SBU program. So I know we budgeted for the 8.2, knowing that if we had these major weather events, we might have to go higher. I hear you saying that that's a possibility given the volume of calls that you've had and the number of folks that qualify for the program. Do you have any idea how much higher by any, say we were to not have any more 1,000-year flooding events in our community. I'm just wondering, by way of budgeting, because your budget's going to come forward here in a few months, what do you think?
If we were just talking about the response activities, so the cost of the cleaning and our labor, I think we are already estimating that this would be about $5 million just from just for July. So we have about $5 million, a little less than that. So I don't think it's going to just be that. We probably will get some claims in as well from all of the events that we've had this year. But I'm looking. Yeah, I don't want to say for sure, but a couple million. Maybe up to 10 million this year, and the larger, cost will be in the future years with the claims. So we're hopeful that we'll have more information here in the next week or two, because we can really get, once we have those numbers in and those invoices start coming in from our cleaning contractors, that'll be more evident.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that information. And I think but I'm going to say I have always said that if we were to run over that program budget, that we are always in a position to put more dollars in that budget because it's a very high priority of the board. And we want to make sure that people have confidence that if they have, if they're qualifying for this program, that there's going to be money in that program to support that. So I just want to reiterate that so people don't misunderstand our level of commitment to the SBU program. We are always committed to this, and we'll put more money in if need be. Also, I wanted to talk, I know this 48 hours, remember we had a conversation about this. It used to be 24 hours. People needed to notify. We extended that to 48 hours to make it easier for people. And I understand the reason that you have to do it in a certain amount of time so that you can really do a great evaluation on what you're looking at. Did I hear you say, though, that if it's MSD's capacity issue, that you get so many calls in such a short amount of time, people can't get a hold of you in 48 hours, that you are making allowances for that? And then if people have been trying to get you, they couldn't get you because of the volume, that you're giving some flexibility there so that people that do qualify for the program can get their assistance?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And I think there was a day, early last week, coming out of the weekend, where the phone systems were dropping calls, people were put on hold. And so we recognize that. We also just recognize the volume, and just wanting people to have an opportunity. So any report we've received, up through yesterday, we were still investigating those. and authorizing cleaning. So we're not, we always err on the side of, we will authorize cleaning if it appears to have been, if their neighbor had reported, those are other ways we can make determinations, even if we didn't get their report until, a week later. The issue with the delay could come as we look at the claims and the ability to document damages. So that's where it gets a little bit hard to make a blanket, exception, because really will depend on the ability to document damages to be reimbursed for those. And that's where, some of those legal requirements come in with those 48 hours. But we're not going to, last week we were responding to all the calls we received, and we were well beyond 48 hours.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that people have
Yes.
confidence that they will be listened to, and they have the ability to reach out. And
They have the ability to reach out. They still have the ability to file a claim as well. So,
very good. Thank you very much. I look forward to the rest of the presentation.
thank you.
I'm sorry, I have one other question. Have we moved to technology where people can apply on their phone, by text, fill it out? I hate to use this example, but like TurboTax, you put this stuff in, and if you hit boom, 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 you hit it, it's in the system. Because, we got technology, we've changed now, versus we on the phone and we wait and hold with the music. I want us to move to that. I know I mentioned that a couple years ago. I don't know if we got there, but it would be so much more helpful if you had a number of ways to file a claim. You can, of course, you got online, you can do a phone call, or you can go to your smartphone and you can fill out, and then we're definitely gonna have a follow-up. So you're already in the queue. Did we move on that yet? I know we had mentioned it a while ago.
So if you're talking about the initial report, so the ability to just, after an event, to report your sewer backup to us, the online process is, there's a link on our website. You can get to it. It's mobile friendly. That is through our GIS-based system. So it is, it's also a very short amount of information. So just to get the initial report to us, it's either a phone call or an online report that's mobile friendly. When we get to the claims process, we do have an online form or a paper form, but there's a lot of documentation involved. Whether or not that has been, is the most streamlined, we can take a closer look at that. But I think the bigger part of that is that requires the customer to have a lot of documentation, and they can upload all of that online. But that's it's not a simple fillable form, because there's those additional steps of the documentation.
Yeah, I'm talking about the phone backup. Are these people?
So that's the reports. Yes,
That's the report.
So the initial report, and at that point in time, when we recognized that the phones we were having issues with the phones. It was last Monday, I believe. We were trying to get the message out to report online, so we didn't have any issues there. So,
And these people on the phones were not making initial. You talking about they filling out a whole form?
no. This was just the initial.
That's what
I
I'm
had a
trying
sewer
to say.
backup.
That's what I'm saying. If we had something you put out, go to, just like we got 513relief.org, and you go right to it. You can fill out. That will relieve some of the phone backup, is what I was saying. And if that's something we could put out, hey, this is, I don't know, just throwing it out, whatever, sbu.org. We got to try to find those kind of ways. We can't.
And that's what we were putting out during the event. So yes, should be the first thing you get to on our website. It says report a sewer backup.
We
were putting it in press releases and
let's try to do a little better, because that go here and online, I'm telling you, it's everybody now is, if it ain't on this where I can hit two buttons, it's antiquated. We don't want to be as old as the sewers. We want to be able to, this could be real fast, and it can help relieve the phone lines, like you said, because of course you're gonna have phone lines, but there's another thing that you ain't got to go to www. and all that. Just that's what I was trying to get to. That can help. And if you put these two things in, or three things, you ain't eligible, it can tell you that you ain't eligible. So I would hope, I know I mentioned it, and we had so many other things, but I'd like to put that back on. That would help us, I think, just make it as simple as we can. We understand they got to have documents. And in fact, there are things now where they got documents. I mean, hell, medical records. They take a picture and they go right in. So I want to invest in some technology if we can in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take a look. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Engineering analysis.
yes, engineering. My engineer will come up.
Yeah, he's been doing a lot of talking back there, so finally you get the.
I'm sorry,
onto
I
the
didn't mean to be
microphone. It's okay.
distracting. Appreciate the opportunity, Commissioners, to share with you some more of it. Obviously, we're still in response mode, but we have begun looking at what are some of the factors behind this. And so this is going to answer, President, some of your questions about the storms and what they look like and what we had. And I wanted to share this graph with you. It represents rainfall as it accumulates over the duration of a storm. So the depth of rain is on the y-axis, like going up, right? And the total rainfall for the event would be shown. For example, I've got 2 lines there. The top one is a 10-year design storm, and the total rainfall in that event is 4 inches. And it accumulates over the duration of the storm. And so I have a couple design storms. That's what engineers use to design these systems. A 2-year storm is typically what we see the biggest in a year. In a typical year, that's kind of average, to give you a sense for that. And then the 10-year storm is there. That's what we design new infrastructure to. So that's our design standard. We'd love it if this line was slow and gradual over a storm. It's these steep sections that steep section right here, that's what kills us. It's so intense, and that's what we saw so bad over the last 2 weeks was real intensity. So I want to show you a couple of slides, a couple of storms. So that first storm that Diana mentioned on July 11th, which was characterized as a 100-year storm, had an extremely quick, went from no rain to 3 inches of rain, which is a significant amount, but it happened so quickly. And that was unprecedented. That was a 100-year storm. And that's obviously beyond what our sewer system can handle, because even if we designed it, a new one, to a 10-year storm, it doesn't have that much capacity over such a short term. So then the big event on July 17th was another storm that dumped over 5 inches of rain more on the east side. And it happened so quickly that this was even characterized as a 1,000-year storm, as you've already heard. It's clearly beyond what the system is designed to handle. And then lastly, we had a storm on Tuesday, really back-to-back with the one on the 17th, that only dumped less than 3 inches of rain, but it happened so quickly that's characterized as a 50-year storm. Seems a little tame compared to the 1,000-year a couple days before, but you've seen what that creates. You've seen it on the news, on the social media. It was catastrophic, and it was over. If you remember back to the beginning of the presentation, it was over a wide swath of our service area. So that was also extremely difficult to manage in our system. And the point I'm trying to make here is that the storms we've received over the last 2 weeks are extreme. And their intensity, more than just their total depth, is what has overwhelmed the MSD sewer system. And it wasn't that it failed; it was just overwhelmed. And with nowhere else for the water to go, it goes into our combined sewer systems, as Diana was mentioned, and then it backs up into people's homes and businesses and creates a lot of damage. It also flows over the land, over sidewalks, over streets. We've seen those videos on the news. And then it's going to pool in the natural low spots, which are in some people's backyards or, unfortunately, sometimes into their homes and businesses. And it's catastrophic. So when we look at what happened and what we can do about it, we're looking at that first thing. What we can address is when there's too much water and it gets into our combined system. But when we talk about that overland flooding, that we need some help with. So we've wanted to start looking at solutions. We have been looking at solutions. We don't have answers all yet, but we have begun. And there's 3 things we've identified that we are actively working on at MSD. First is evaluating our sewer system. see where the problems can be addressed through our capital improvement program. Second is encourage more stormwater detention on private property, using policy and various tools there to mitigate the impact on the public sewer. And then also studies these conditions that are creating these very extreme storms and see if there are other factors that are contributing to their intensity. So I'm going to run through some of the things that we've identified already with over the last couple of years with the great support from the commissioners. We've initiated several series of studies looking at these areas. We chartered an East Side SBU study that's been completed. That was to look at a comprehensive solution for the 3 sewer basins on the east side of town. It was pretty sobering. The results from that study said a comprehensive solution for the SBUs on that side, just for that 10-year design storm that I put up, which was much less than we got. Price tag was $2.4 billion in 2022 dollars. Like a comprehensive solution there. So that got us thinking that we need to really look at a range of options for all the SBU areas across the county. So we have commissioned a countywide SBU study, which is in progress, where we're looking at the SBU clusters across the service area and identifying a range of solution for those. But recognizing that this problem isn't going away and it keeps coming back and back, we started another study, which is now complete, which is an urgent capacity capital project study, so that we could fast track some of those solutions and get them on their way to being built. We actually identified 10 of those. One is already in planning right now and was in the 2026 CIP, which you have authorized, and we're moving forward with that one, and those other 9 are close on its heels. So we'll be nominating those for consideration of the board in our CIP in the coming years. Last is a specific study on the Linwood Observatory area, which is looking at the portion of the Hyde Park and Mount Lookout neighborhoods, and then the significant SBUs that are downstream of that. It was an area that was hit really hard in the last 10 days. That study is underway, almost complete. And it actually is the study that I've got, the study area there, really close to the epicenter of that really bad storm on the 17th. So those are underway, and we look forward to reporting out to the board and nominating more projects that we can do under our capital improvement program to address some of these problems. Another thing we looked at was encouraging stormwater detention on private property. And you may recognize this slide, the pink areas. We spoke back in January about our strategic risk reduction initiatives for SBUs. And this is where we are looking at parts of town where there are these clusters of SBUs, and we need to be very cautious about putting any more flow in the system in these areas. And so we identified these storms that experience these backups in small storms. We call them Larissas, and they're shown in pink there. And they create areas in our service area where we were really sensitive to new development. So we consider that when anybody applies to connect to our system. The last thing we want to do is add more flow to a system that is overwhelmed. And so we are now piloting 2 different programs. We've spoken about this before. We have the credit area program in the separated areas where we are, and our intergovernment agreement with Sharonville is an example of where we are partnering with the municipality to share the cost and the effort to remove stormwater from the system. And then in combined areas, we call those critical capacity areas. That's not a place where credit systems work, but instead we are working with the developers in those areas. Anything upstream of SBU areas have to meet enhanced detention requirements in those areas. And so that we're making sure that we're leaving the system better than it was before. So those are 2 things that we're doing to encourage more stormwater retention on private property, to reduce the impact on the public system. And last, this is actually maps of radar, and is a screenshot from actually a time lapse that I didn't show, just from a pop-up storm on the 17th, right? We've seen these patterns. So I apologize for being an engineer, and we see patterns, and we found some patterns to these intense storms that seem to pop up in the same places over and over again. We're wondering if there's some topographical or urbanization issues or effects, but we're not climatologists. So we're connecting with researchers at UC, University of Cincinnati, to see if some of their smart minds there can help evaluate if there are conditions that are making these storms worse than we could possibly imagine. But at the end of the day, those are things MSD are doing, but at the end of the day, stormwater, and it was brought up by Commissioner Reese, there's a lot of people involved in this. There's a lot of questions being asked. This is a diagram from Hamilton County Stormwater District annual report. It shows that there are over 50 organizations with a role in stormwater management across our service area. Many of the townships, all the townships, and many of the municipalities have joined and are co-permittees with Hamilton County Stormwater District, but the city of Cincinnati and some other cities are not part of that. They have their own, and they're shown in gray up there. Green is what Hamilton County Stormwater District. I don't mean to be speaking out of my lane, but this is a Hamilton County service area, or MSD service area, and we recognize that we are a partner in this, and that it's going to take a tremendous amount of collaboration across these agencies to deal with what's really affecting our citizens. And the thing that I heard earlier was that flooding and flash flooding is the biggest risk to our community. So I think that this identifies where communication, collaboration, cooperation is going to pay big dividends, and MSD is definitely a part of that. So that ends my part of the presentation. Happy to take questions.
Thank you for your presentation. I'll open it up, Vice President Reese.
Yes, can we go back to the study? You said you completed a study on the east side, and isn't that where all the flooding hit the hardest? Or is that the same area?
So the east side study looked at the entire east side of Cincinnati. So essentially everything east of I-71, and we have three sewer basins that are east of 71. Some that flows down to the Little Miami wastewater treatment plant. So that east side of Cincinnati and those eastern suburbs. One's called Sycamore, which the Sycamore Township, and then Polk Run. So we looked at all three of those areas. I don't have a graphic of the service area, but it's like the third east side of the county.
Gotcha. So my question is, did we find something that was more urgent than others? I know you said you completed the study.
Yes, we completed a study in
10-year design, but I'm just trying to find out, is this the area that it got hit? I mean, the east side, I saw a bus that was completely flooded on a metro bus. Was your findings that this could happen in that area, or was we still?
So we were the area that the significant flooding happened on the 17th would be on the east side, and we studied that area looking at. We've seen these flooding or the sewer backup clusters. We weren't trying to solve. We can't solve the stormwater flooding. We were trying to solve the backups in the sewer and the MSD sewer, and we were trying to solve that whole area, and that's where the price tag got monumental. We know there's areas, so that's why we commissioned the following studies to say, hey, we need to look at these rather than saying, oh, we're going to fix this whole area for $2.4 billion. Let's look at SBU clusters individually and see what those would cost. And so that's the subsequent study that's not done yet.
Gotcha. So just because I'm looking at all these studies, and no offense, engineer cost and everybody's studying, but while we're studying, I understand. I'm just trying to, these things are becoming a little more regular, around the country. So, the folks on the east side really ticked off because they're like, what in the world happened over here? And they kind of want some answers. But I guess what we're hearing today is MSD is not the entity for the answers on this. Somebody else is. We're just trying to get to the bottom. How does the Metro bus get flooded? How does the east side get flooded? People want to know about the Madison Road floodgate. That's what they kind of want to know now. I know we've got all these studies, and then I want to know about all this engineer costs, professional services, just no offense, study and study and study. I know it's a big price tag.
Well,
Is there a warning sign that we saw, or maybe that didn't fall under you? I'm just trying to find out who is the person to deal with what just happened.
yeah, we're not the sole agency responsible for flooding.
Okay.
We're responsible for the sanitary sewer, the combined sewer, and so when there isn't other infrastructure there, it ends up in our sewer and impacts our ratepayers. And so that's where we focus, and we're determined to solve that for our ratepayers. And these studies are moving quickly, and that's why that third study I wanted to highlight, we recognized that we couldn't just study and study and study this. We needed to find projects. We found 10 of them that are already on the books, fast-tracked, moving towards nomination to you for inclusion in the CIP. But again, that's to address the sewer, that's not the bus flooding.
Gotcha. Okay. And then does this affect, this pervious surface fee? Because all this water that came out, extremely brown, but all this water, how would that work? Is somebody responsible for paying for all that? Is somebody rate going to go up because of it, or you're not involved in that? So they'll get.
Unfortunately, a lot of the water they see is brown.
Yeah.
That could be dirt. It could be from the sewers, and that's why it's hard to say what that brown water is. I'm not going to encourage anybody to go into that brown water. So what we're trying to do is minimize the water that gets into our sewer, MSD sewer, where it mixes with the sewage that we definitely don't want to be coming out. A lot of what happened, and you'll see on the social medias and everything like that, you see rivers flooding down people's streets and down their steps and everything like that. That is not sewage coming out of the sewer. It's just coming down from the sky and rolling off people's lawns and off their impervious surface areas. And that, yes, is something that we as a region need to come together and figure out how to solve, because there's too much impervious area. The water can't get in. And Diana made a point, though. We had 2 storms back to back. Even the grass that we had was saturated really hard. But that's definitely something we need to look at.
Yeah. I'd like to know if there's any cost with this pervious surface. I know we did a pilot program, but just want to make sure that not only did people's stuff get destroyed, but now they got an extra bill. So
I understand.
that's what I like to. We don't have to have it today, but I like to have that so that the ratepayer doesn't get any surprises.
Understand.
Like you said, it wasn't their fault. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Driehaus.
Thank you. Just to put in context what you said regarding the study that was comprehensive and was trying to solve for a lot of this, the price tag was $2.4 billion. Can you remind us how much our annual MSD budget is?
Wow. Yes, it's much smaller than that. Our operating budget, which includes the debt service and operations and all that, is around $200 million a year. Our capital program this year was $153 million.
Okay, so I just want to put that in context, because I too have been asked, why can't we do more here or rebuild the system? And that's just for one area, $2.4 billion. The rates would, I can't imagine what the rates would have to go up to in order to cover that. Or
and that's just for a 10-year storm. And
that's right. So the challenge here is to be more intentional and more strategic about what we're doing. And you talked about there's these hot spots that in the areas that are most prone to flooding. We know this. We've got the maps, right? And so we have to be more strategic about what we're doing, and again, in collaboration. I just want to ask one quick question about your map. The map with the pink
Yes.
pockets on it. I noticed that, explain to me what the green is, because that green, which looks like sewer lines, doesn't reach out to certain parts of the county. So does the green indicate a combined system?
No, the green indicates both combined and sanitary. This part of the county is not sewered.
Yeah, up to the far west, northwest.
Yes.
So I think it's striking that we've got quite a big area that is unsewered. I just wanted to clarify that. I didn't know if this was just combined or
No.
total system.
Total system.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Even it oops, gosh, sorry, fat fingers on the button. But it even extends a little bit into the surrounding counties. We have agreements with that.
Okay. I just was struck by the lack of sewering up on the west side. Okay, so we talked a little bit about this collaborative approach between MSD, city stormwater, county stormwater, EMA, who's already presented, even the engineer's office, trying to come together to not only go for these federal dollars that was mentioned before, but also to put our heads together to try to solve for these big issues that are going to cost a lot of money, but also are going to take a lot of expertise to try to sort through, and where we have been, and you mentioned a number of studies and where we're going. I do want to mention that as the county's representative on the stormwater district, we've had conversations about an increased fee for stormwater, not the city stormwater, mind you, but the county stormwater. And I was told that the system is primarily meant to address water quality, not water quantity. So if we need to create some change in the county system, it's going to take a rethinking, and I'm all for it, of how we address stormwater outside the city and in the county with all these other jurisdictions. As you say, they're all partnering with us through these fees, and folks are paying these fees. But if we really want to get some funding to start to think about what's going on outside the city, the stormwater district is an obvious place to start to have that conversation. So again, thank you for your presentation. Madam President, if you don't mind, I want to ask Holly Chrisman to come up to talk a little bit more about.
I have a question for him though before she comes up. Thank you. I wanted to look at the map, the purple and green map that talks about stormwater management and shared responsibility. I know outside of the city, the camp like Forest Park is doing well. They decided they wanted to do their own stormwater. Springdale, I'm looking at the purple color, and it says the non-district community. Yeah.
That one?
Yours doesn't-
This one.
Yours is green and
Oh yeah,
mine
yours
is
is
purple here.
printed out purple. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Gray up on my screen. I apologize.
So, but outside of the city limits, they're doing well with their stormwater. And Forest Park was just a huge flood every time it flooded. So which other ones outside of the city, when you say it's so hard to read, non-district community, do they have their own stormwater system?
They do, and they manage it separately from Hamilton County's stormwater district, which
Right,
is
and
like
I'd like to know who
I don't have that list with me. I know that there are 36 municipalities. 24 are part of Hamilton County Stormwater District co-permittees. I don't know the 12 off the top of my head.
Okay, I'd like to know the 12.
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Another thing, we were talking about combined systems, and you were saying 85 to 90% are combined in the city.
Yes.
And we find out outside of
Absolutely.
the city.
I apologize for not having
there
that off
are.
the top of my head. It's closer to
okay.
50-50.
Yeah, you're not perfect, even though you're an engineer. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your grace.
But and I also wanted to speak to the pilot that you did, that when you guys came in and you went over it and asked for approval from the board.
Yes.
And so we did give you approval to really see what was going on, and we did find out what was going on in that pilot. So I thank you for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a great start in that area, and an example that other communities are approaching us about.
Absolutely. Okay. Holly, would you like to come up?
So, Madam President, for just to get some context from Holly regarding some of the collaboration that's already taking place or has taken place with all of these different entities, I think it would be helpful to level set, because that is where we need to look to continue to think about this flooding issue and overland flooding. There was a report done, and we got it early, I think it was in the spring, related to some of this work. And so, Holly, I hope you can just reference that. And then we've talked around a little bit about the impervious surface issue that we've been talking about for about 9 years here on the County Commission. And we've got a pilot program running, and obviously impervious surfaces are contributing to the flooding in these communities. To what degree, I think it's hard to tell, but definitely a contributor. And so I do want to, I think we need to think about moving more aggressively on that to move that pilot more quickly, so that as we continue to see these kind of flooding events, we are incentivizing property owners to collect stormwater on their own properties, plant trees, have a retention basins, so that we can alleviate some of the flooding that's going in to the larger system, which is causing all the problems. So, but Holly, could you talk a little bit about that report that we got a while back?
Sure, yeah, I'd like to hit actually 4 areas that this board has authorized, either a study or actual projects, just really quickly at a high level. So first, just to tag on to MSD's presentation, MSD is not the sole party responsible for stormwater. They are an important partner in it. So in March, the board received a presentation on a study we did to looking at ways to improve collaboration amongst all the stormwater entities. And that effort did include MSD, Hamilton County Stormwater, Planning and Development, Cincinnati, SMU, and they did, as was reported to the board, list some short and longer term recommendations. So I'm happy to recirculate that to the board and give an update on that. Secondly, in terms of the BRIC grant that was mentioned earlier, we did, with Anson Turley's leadership, we did apply for a BRIC grant and received one with the Springfield Township for an area that is chronic flooding in that area. So again, a little collaboration there. And of course, the board authorized almost $6 million in our one-time, I want to stress, it was one-time ARPA funding for stormwater mitigation projects. And we did fund 11 communities for projects. The largest, President Summer Dumas mentioned, was the city of Norwood, to help prevent flooding in the Elm Avenue area. And then just quickly, the 4th is that excess wet weather surcharge that MSD has been looking at. And we do anticipate bringing that forward to the board during the 4th quarter of this year for consideration, with the program ideally launching sometime in 2027. So that's just at a high level, 4 areas that the board has asked us to look at. And I can happy to answer any questions or go into more detail.
Thank you. And if you wouldn't mind getting us those 11 communities that, I think Newtown was one.
Yeah, I can rattle them off if you'd like.
Yeah, so because the projects, from my understanding, have worked. They're expensive, but they worked. And so if we could take this more strategic approach, and through MSD and maybe some grants from the federal government, try to narrow in on some of what is already working in the community, I think that would be a good way to go in the future. So thank you. I think it helps to level set some of what's already happening. That's all I have, Madam President.
Okay, and it sounds like outside of the city allocations, those are working. And so it's internal more within the city that needs to be looked a little closer as far as not stopping the flash flooding, but building the infrastructure. We didn't give anything directly to the city, did we?
Not in this ARPA fund.
Right, I didn't think so, yeah. Okay, I don't have any questions. Did you have something?
Yeah, I had one. So I want to give back to the people who are affected right now. I know we've got some things down the road, and we didn't expect this to happen, obviously. But a lot of people are in a 911 situation. Small businesses already suffering. We've helped a lot of small businesses, but they didn't expect this. When I'm seeing them trying to, and I'm sure the insurance situation is going to be tougher. Is there any, and the fact that you said we didn't do the city part of it, obviously, is there any money that we have? I'm always asking this, Holly, the hard part, or Jeff, or Ludo, I want to look creatively. Is there anything we can offer through our small business office to some of these small businesses who gonna get caught in the switches because they just don't have, they barely. I mean, I was seeing them on TV crying, trying to clean out. I mean, is there anything we can do, or is there any ARPA small business or others that we can help? Because I think that's where we're at now. If my business is flooded and everything, it's nice to tell me we studying and we gonna do this. But I need help right now. Is there anything we can do through 513 relief or through the Office of Small Business? We've done a lot. We're sometimes able to pivot. You might not have an answer today. I just want to put that on the plate, Mr. Ludo. And
I don't have an answer today, but I can tell you that Kelly Adamson is talking to Greg Forte with the Office of Small Business about any options or resources. So we can get back to you on that.
okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Holly. We'll move forward to our next agenda item, which I've written all over my. So it's Children's Services, I'm sure.
And Commissioners, as Lisa Webb is going to give a brief presentation on this, but this is really, there's nothing to vote on today. This item is really just designed to be a touch point for commissioners to consider and discuss any options that are currently on the table, ask for any final options, that type of thing. So again, nothing to vote on today, but just an opportunity for a touch point prior to the final board meeting, which is on August 3rd, which is the last day before the board can vote to certify something to the ballot. So,
Thank you, Jeff.
Lisa, with that.
Appreciate it.
Sure. This is just a quick overview. I know commissioners have heard versions of this presentation many times over the course of this year, so I'm going to go through this rather quickly, but let me know if you need any additional detail as we go throughout. Background on the Children's Services Levy for those watching. The Children's Services Levy provides the mandated services to support children's services and the care and placement of children. The levy remained unchanged for 22 years before voters approved the increase last in 2018. The current levy expires at the end of this year and costs taxpayers roughly $81 per $100,000 home value. Rising costs and increasing complexities of kids in care are creating long-term funding challenges within this levy. Placement costs have increased more than 90% since 2022, which was the first year of this levy period. And the number of children in care has increased nearly 20%, with those children having higher complexity of needs than we had seen in years and levy periods past. Why are those costs raising? A lot of this is what I've just mentioned with the complexity of cases, violence and aggression, depression, mental health, crime, substance abuse, self-harm, trauma, PTSD. It's important to note that 80% of the children JFS serves in Hamilton County are in family placement. That would be kinship and foster care. But if you look a little bit at this chart on the right of the presentation, you can see the costs of care based on the different level of need for the children. So kinship care costs the county and the levy about $7,000 per placement. Foster care about $40,000. Group homes go up to $109,000. Residential treatment, on average, $168,000 per child in care. The TLRC's recommendation was received by the commissioners earlier this spring. That recommendation was $144 million per year. The recommendation required continued cuts, but still increased the levy by $61 million to continue to cover the mandated services needed. That recommendation equated out to a 6.57 mil levy costing $154, it should be $154, I apologize for the M there, per $100,000 home value. In addition to the TLRC recommendation, the board is considering a range of options. You should have a spreadsheet PDF looks like this in front of you. This is a list of all of the options the the commissioners have under consideration, and auditors' estimates have been received. Certificates have been requested for each of these options. The options range from an increase of $33 million to an additional $72 million in levy support, and terms ranging from 2 years to 5 years. The reduced term options, and really anything below that $144 million TLRC recommendation, include leveraging one-time county resources to help with the levy and support while keeping taxes as low as possible. We are continuing to assess opportunities for efficiencies and considering the levy in light of other social services levies within it. For an example about these options in front of you, the $33 million increase, which is an additional 1.10 mils, which is the lowest amount on the sheet in front of you, amounts to comparison to the TLRC recommendation that was $61 million increase and 2.6 mils increase. If you compare the two, the lowest amount represents a 39% increase in revenues that would be received by the levy versus the TLRC recommendation, which would be a 72% increase in revenues. Similarly, that low amount that I just mentioned, the additional 1.1 mils, is a 24% increase in voted levy millage, whereas the TLRC would be a 46% increase in voted levy millage. How would we be able to, or how would JFS be able to handle receiving that smaller levy amount? Through those one-time general fund resources to supplement the levy and reduce the level of increased taxation needed to support children's services. Currently, this example that I gave is proposed as a 2-year levy, although additional terms could be considered for this or any of the other options that were presented. How do we get there and keep the levy balanced for the long term? This is a list of examples of things that are ongoing, work towards trying to decrease that the long-term needs. We're looking to refine the intake model for kids coming into care, continuing to utilize kinship whenever possible, though I always have to note in that Hamilton County is the forerunner in the state of Ohio, with 36% of kids going into kinship care, the highest of any of the urban counties. We're continuing to look at right-sizing levels of care through all the time that the kiddos are receiving care through our services, reducing non-mandated services and continuing to review that, looking at state systems like Ohio Rise when kids need additional hospitalization and services, continuing to maximize federal and state reimbursements whenever possible, looking at repositioning the Hillcrest facility as a wellness center to help with kids initially coming into care and making sure that they're stabilized and then right-sized with the best level of care for them going forward. The state is continuing to assess the use of a rate card to set rates for levels of care throughout the state. We are still waiting for information on how that will impact the levy, and continuing federal advocacy for equitable cost sharing with the state and federal government. Next steps, the board held public hearings on June 18th, 14th, and 16th, July 14th and July 16th. At the July 16th meeting, the board approved the raft of requests of the auditor to certify millage rates, of which were these 10 options that I presented. The board is scheduled at their next meeting, which is Monday, August 3rd at 10 a.m. to consider ballot options. The state deadline for those ballot options is that they must be approved, the final ballot resolution must be approved and received by Hamilton County Board of Elections by 4 p.m. on Wednesday, August 5th. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for your presentation. I just had a couple questions. When we looked at the public hearings, we had 3 public hearings. How many did TLRC have?
The Tax Levy Review Committee had 2 public hearings as well, both at the Central Campus location in the evening.
Very good. And the reason why I bring that up is when we made the decision to put this on the November ballot, my decision was because I wanted more public hearings for people to be aware as much as possible what we were considering, and I think we've done a good job with the public hearings. Of course, we're going to have a little more marketing as it relates to why we were agreeable on a certain levy of a level of the levy. So I appreciate that. And I'm not going to say a lot because I know we'll have a lot to say on Thursday. Well, I just imagine we will. But when you were, it says keeping the levy balanced long term, well, first and foremost for me is that I would just want us to take the least amount out of our general budget, and I'm sure we all do, to use for other services. But we repositioning Hillcrest, which is a great idea, a great concept. We need to do it, but that's going to be more money. It's not going to be less money by doing that. We look at staffing and all the services we bring in, and then of course the state rate card. We're already above where we need to be, so we're going to have to put out money for that. I don't know how that process is going to work. As you said, we're trying to determine the process, but that's more money coming out. So I'm just deeply concerned about the level that we're considering now. But of course, I think you guys have done a lot of work, and so we have to. My opinion is to get as much money to supplement these services without hurting the residents. It's going to hurt them either way you go because prices are up on everything. But how can we supply the necessary needs, maybe in a shorter period of time? Like you say, maybe 2 years instead of 4. But to go back to ask for additional levies, I don't know how that's going to work. I'll just leave it at that until Thursday. Vice President Reese.
Thank you for the synopsis. Very tough decision. And we do have some options, but the one option that I want to look at is probably a lot more, it's going to really require thinking out the box. I mean, I have a very big problem that when it comes to foster children, they have to go to the ballot every few years, and I think we need a more sustainable financial model. And stadiums, while we enjoy them, they only had to go to the ballot one time. Now, this is not you. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the voters that I'm hearing from, saying that they went one time and they're funded almost for life without having to go back to the voters. And the children are temporarily funded and have to go back every so many years. I think it sends the absolute wrong message in Hamilton County as it relates to the priorities. And I know we've been doing this for years, but it's a lot of stuff that need to be redone that might have been around for years. And I believe that we could borrow against future earnings of the stadiums. And when the stadiums are up, they can go to the ballot. They got money to go to the ballot. These are billionaires. They can go to the ballot versus nonprofits trying to scrape up some money to put a campaign together to save the children. If we're really concerned about the children, we've got to get just as creative as we get with these stadiums. We always say we can do creative financing, creative this. And the days of property taxes, paying for everything, is going to soon come to an end because people are at their end wits. These are people who have been supporting, and I want to thank them in advance because they're the ones that have kept our children safe, funded, and with opportunity. So it's not a question about should we fund our children. It's a question of where are our priorities. And so as soon as I say stadium, they get all kind of notes. Oh, we can't do it. We can't afford it. We can't. And if they come here tomorrow and need some, we done found some money. The stadiums are a luxury. The children are a necessity. So necessity should come first, and once we fund that, then we can fund luxuries. And so I feel like we could get a lot more creative. 72% increase in this economy is, I'm seeing them. They in Kroger's putting meat back because they can't afford it. Duke Energy done come in with a 30% increase and nobody is stopping them. Nobody's stopping them. Increase. Then we just had these floods, and we had all these people come in. They say, ain't no help, really. Go to this one. No, go to that one. No, we ain't got it. The only people making money is engineers. I mean, I'm coming to you from the real, not coming to you as the politician. And we got to fund our children. But we need to be looking at all of that before we go funding all these other things. Now, that's always a different pot of money. It's a sales tax. And it was to build them, not to keep going. Because I know some people voted for it, to build. But then if they want more, go back to the ballot. Not send the kids to the ballot. And they stay in the suites. They can make billions and the kids got to beg to survive. It's the wrong message. So I really believe borrowing against the future earnings, stabilizing the children's levy fund for 2 years, give us a chance to implement the program you put on that board that's going to help us with kinship and all. We got a new program to see if we're able to stabilize. And then they'll say, well, we got some other stadiums, and then go to the ballot. They're billionaires. They can go to the ballot. They went to the ballot before, but they only went one time, and they good for a lifetime. Children, every couple years, we got to help the children. The children should be first and foremost, and not to 72%. I mean, gosh, that's a big jump. Now, we'll come out and say, oh, it ain't nothing but $100. Go ask Grandma, does she got an extra? She ain't got an extra 100. Now she got to fix this flood because we ain't got no real money for them. Because they'll say, oh, you didn't qualify, and fill out all this paperwork. We got small businesses that can't even open the doors now because they trying to clean up. We ain't got nothing for them. Well, we'll check and see if we got some. So our priorities, messaging for me, I'm not speaking for anyone else, the priority messaging is wrong and is out of step with the taxpayers. Then you got CPS. I read they coming with something, trying to get in your check. Your check gonna be short. It's a lot at the same time. So what I'm trying to look at, how can we do this? How do we be more creative? How do we stabilize for the next 2 years while we can come with something that's a more sustainable model? Because these are the people that's been supporting our children. And they've been our supporters. They don't need to be our adversaries. So the question is, it's not, oh, you for children. Now, I'm for children. And that's why I say we should take the stadium sales tax. And we need to borrow against the future. And then when it's their time, then go to the ballot. And if the people want to be more, they can. They have more money to put up a campaign than running with these nonprofits. Now, I'm going to say something else to these nonprofits, because I didn't see that either. I don't know how much money they're paying. I don't know what kind of cuts they've said they're going to incur. I've heard nothing about them saying, we're going to incur some readjustments. And I haven't heard that yet. Maybe we'll hear it before the final vote. But everybody is going to sting everybody. Everybody got to be all hands on deck and take the sting. Can't just put the sting on the homeowners. Everybody got to make some shuffling. Can't just be JFS alone trying to make shuffle. Some of these nonprofits, I don't know what the salaries are, but I like to see some adjustments. So now it looks like everybody's taking some adjustment to try to make this all hands on deck. So all the options I appreciate, but the option I see missing is the option that I had brought forward. And I think we need to readjust. We got to switch it. All the pressure on funding the children when it should be the pressure on these other projects. Some development things we got going. It got to be on them, not on the children. The children have to come first. So those are the things that I'm hearing. They can't make it to the people I know. They say they can't make it to these hearings. They working 2 and 3 jobs. That's why they sent me down here to represent them. And I'm trying to give some of their thoughts that I've been hearing and put it on the table. I'm not saying nobody else ain't heard nothing, but I'm just telling you, it's rough out here. People are losing jobs, and we ain't even talking about it. Departments are getting rid of departments. People losing jobs. I'm talking about some good jobs. And they just don't know how they gonna do it. Families moving in with each other, trying to make it. We got to be, what is the times? 20 years ago, might have been better. Maybe it'll get better. They claim the economy swings up. Let's do a hold on until the economy swings up. And it's not our fault because we got an unfunded mandate. But we find ways for everything else. Pen the paper. When it comes to the children, we run into the taxpayers with a 72% increase, potentially. But I'm glad we got some other options, and I'll be looking at them. Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Dreehouse.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation again. Again, just as I'd like to level set where this is the levy that keeps kids safe in our community and helps them thrive, really. It's more about keeping kids safe. It's about helping kids thrive. So some of the program that we have and balancing that with the cost of, or the reason for the increase is the cost of care for these kids, and then the balance with the property taxpayers who are strained, and we need to consider all things as we think about the different options, the many options in front of us. I wanted to focus a little bit on the lowest option that we've been given, the 39% increase. So, and my understanding is the 39% increase, then we've got a gap between that and the recommendation. We've already made significant cuts, $36 million of cuts to the Children's Services Levy. I see the strategies to continue to cost cut, and there are numerous, and I appreciate that too. We can do things differently to continue to think about how we reduce the cost to this levy and then use one-time general fund dollars for a couple of years to try to not eliminate some of the things that we think are so important. And we've heard this through many of the public hearings, particularly about kids that age out of the system, and that there were about 200 kids in the system that are over 18 that we're helping with housing assistance and employment assistance. And if we don't do that, we're likely to pay for that in another way down the road. And so it's a good investment in these young people to make sure they stabilize once they leave our system. And so I've heard a lot about, how we need to continue this program, but it's not mandated. And so trying to preserve some of the things that we know work, kinship care is the other one. So I wanted to think through, I think we need to take a more holistic approach, not only to this levy, but to all the levies, given the strain on property taxes in the community right now, and rethink how we address them, not one as they come, which we have generally done, but rather as a collective, and which ones fit together, which ones need the most assistance by way of an increase. And I think we need to take a holistic view so that we don't find ourselves in this position, trying to weigh this, but knowing that we've got other things coming and other things that have passed that either are running flat or running with increases. It's just a lot, and I think we need to think about the taxpayers as we review all the levies in a more holistic way, and think about restructuring maybe some of how we do this work and how we fund this work. And so, to that point, the lowest option is the one that increases 39%, and I think we've got it in front of us for 2 years, and I think that helps us rethink the levies and stabilize to a point, use some general fund dollars to supplement, and then run it and start to think through. I'm wondering if we need more time to provide stability to JFS in this. And so I'm wondering, I don't know if it's too late for this, by way of putting it in front of the auditor and commissioners, and I'm not asking for support so much as consideration of something. We've all been asked over the last month or so, hey, give me your options of what you would like to see by way of something that we can think about and get it from the auditor so we have it in front of us. What we don't have in front of us today is this lowest amount at 4 years so that we can provide just a little bit more stability to JFS. I'm not suggesting that we use general fund monies for all those 4 years because I think right now the considerations is for 2, and I understand that. But I think it might be helpful to have this lowest option in place. Can always change it, but have it run for 4 years just so we have that in front of us to consider when we take the vote. My understanding is next Monday. So I don't know, Jeff, if it's too late to ask the auditor for that option. Can we get that?
I don't think it's too late. We would have to bring a resolution forward probably on Thursday.
To be approved for
To
that,
ask. It's
to request the certificate, but we would be fine on the timeline for that. And since the calculations have already been done for the 2-year, adding that 4-year option is it's not unsurmountable.
So just as an option to have in front of us, not to say that that's what we go with, but I would like to have that one under consideration.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask that we have a resolution then available on Thursday for a vote of the board so we can provide that as one of our options. So that's all I've got. I know, we've got Thursdays here, or a meeting. We've got the vote on Monday to get this thing on the ballot, and I think we're still all sorting through this. So I appreciate the consideration of that one last option. Thank you.
Commissioner Reese, Vice President Reese, where are you on that? The lowest option for 4 years not instead of 2, but to put it in as an option.
Yeah, I don't mind it putting an option. I just, I asked for some options and I got a memo. So I don't mind any commissioner coming with their option and we consider it. But I think that my option should be considered too. All I got was a memo. So I just like to put them all on the table. Obviously, we're gonna make a decision on what it is. So that's where I'm coming from, Mr. Ludo.
Okay.
Because I'd asked for this like a couple weeks. But I thought it was too late. But I have no problem with Commissioner Dreehouse's request. I think it should be. I think all the options should. So people need to know we looked at everything, and I'm okay with that. I think it's so serious that they know that we as a board looked at every potential option we could think of.
So in terms of the option, you're talking about the sales tax option, Commissioner?
Yes.
Yeah, so, and I did send out a staff report on this on Friday. So we did look at that option in several different capacities. We looked at it from the perspective of using annual capacity on an annual basis. If the sales tax produced enough capacity on an annual basis to use that to offset the levy in a similar way that we're talking about using the general fund to do so. So we looked at that. The issue there is that given the obligations of that fund, which are legal obligations of the county, it's not actually expected to generate significant annual capacity to provide any relief to the levy. And even if there was capacity there, and this is a policy issue, but if there were capacity there, the board's current policy is to provide those dollars to the PTR, which is actually a more effective way of providing more relief to owner-occupied homes than simply buying down a levy, which is then spread across all property classifications. So we looked at that on an annual capacity. From a debt capacity, that's something we looked at with bond counsel. Ohio law prohibits the issuance of debt for operating issues, so it would be very difficult. There are some very narrow prescriptive ways that you can issue debt, but it's for the timing of a cash flow issue on a year-to-year basis. But to issue debt for operating purposes under Ohio law, at least according to our bond counsel, we would not be able to do.
It's real. I'm sorry. Can I just say, it's so interesting that every time we come up with something different, you come in and say, Ohio law but it's so legal to fund billionaires in their stadiums. We figure out a way. We go around corners. When you say a policy, I mean, I wasn't here. The PTR, you ain't giving nobody back nothing. It was 30%, and you down at 5 and 2 and 3%. So they ain't getting nothing back anyway, 50 cents. So every time it comes to the homeowner, we can't get creative. You bring everybody. This one, we'll figure out this law don't let us and that law. I feel it's illegal, the stuff we've been doing. I mean, but we find out a way to do it. We run down here. We go and apply for the state funds for those unclaimed funds. And then it says we're going to have to pay, we're going to match it. So now you're going to pay more than what you said the stadium was. Every time the stadium, I got to say, Dag, do I got to pretend to be Mike Brown up in here saying I'm for the kids? Then all of a sudden everybody get to running. We have to get creative. And if we say we for the kids, then that should be first and foremost. Everything else should be on the back burner. Shouldn't even be considered. We should be all hands on deck. We do have a cash flow problem. We had a $30 million deficit. We got a cash flow problem. So I'm just saying that's my frustration. And then we run. I'm a marketer, so I know what we do. We run out and say we got to save the kids, and we back here spending the money on something else. And it is sales tax. I wasn't here when they said it's sales tax. The Bengals Stadium, the Red Stadium, and I love them, it's sales tax. It is not just, and it was for building them, not forever and ever and ever. So that's all I'm just saying. When we try to get creative, when it comes to the kids, it's almost like we got handcuffs on. But then when it comes to everybody else, if the business community comes with a report, we gonna find a way. I'm just saying, let's really try to find a way. So that's all. I wasn't saying fund the whole thing. I was just saying, can we help out a little bit? Because 72% that's big. I mean, I'm sorry, that's big. And anything that go up 72%, that's going to be a hard thing. And I want whatever we do to be successful. It won't be a slap in the face to these kids. We should have put 72% on there and see if they're, even the stadiums don't want to go to the ballot because they know they can't win with a 72% increase. So that's where I'm at. And every time I do something, I done check with Ohio Revised Code and this and this. And luckily, I ain't got time to go through it because I'm sure there's some lawyer somewhere. And I got a lawyer who told me we could do it. That's been in politics and law. That's where I got the idea from. So this ain't just some pie in the sky. So I would hope that we can look at everything. I'm for my colleagues. They got ideas. I'm open to looking at it. I would hope that we would be the same on something I present. Maybe it can do it, maybe it can't. But we need to comb everything. And I do agree with Commissioner Driehaus. We got to have a bigger strategy because we got some other levies coming. And if we do 72% and another one gets 72 or 80%, they can't afford it. They just can't afford it. So I agree with her looking at a larger strategy that we can work on, but we can't work on it right this second, but that we could work on. I have no problem putting your resolution of an idea on there. Anybody got an idea, I want to look at it, and we're all scratching our heads trying to get this thing done. But I'm telling you, I got people complaining about a 30% increase on gas and electric cost. The Duke Energy bill. So you don't just get one bill. You got all these bills stacking up. And then the schools are coming. They got to increase. You total it out, we're not in it kind of alone. So whatever we do, I want it to be successful. And so that's why I put that forward. But this wasn't no pie in the sky. This was a lawyer that does bonding and all that stuff that came up with that potential idea. So thank you.
Thank you.
Some clarity on what the resolution might be. So I am offering or asking for a resolution to run for 4 years at that lowest amount. So that's a 39% increase, not a 72. I just want to be clear on what I'm asking for. It's the lowest amount at 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple comments. Jeff, you were saying we look, as it relates to Vice President Reese's option, the sales tax, and you say we looked at it. You're saying administration looked at it?
Administration and bond counsel, yes.
So her option is not anything that you could present to the auditor to look at?
No.
You know, we have to.
Yeah.
It's well, it's certainly not in the same framework that we're passing a resolution. That what we're doing here is something that is very prescriptively tied to the requirements of the Ohio Revised Code for putting a levy on the ballot. Commissioner Reese's option relates to using sales tax.
Right.
So it would be, it's different than what we're
So
contemplating here.
So what I'm asking is, have we asked the auditor, or would the auditor be one to be asked, as we did with this and got the numbers? And if you submitted to the auditor sales tax, and you know, would she be involved at all as it relates to approving or not approving the funding?
No.
The question, though, because I think I know what you're asking, and that is there an amount that we would want to pass a resolution for, to ask the auditor to certify an amount that would be utilizing potentially this other
tax.
funding? Yeah.
So under that,
If the levy would be a different amount.
for instance, we have the $116 million option, which uses on an annual basis. That option has about $20 million a year
18.5.
for the first 2 years, coming from the general fund. So what I believe Commissioner Reese would be saying on the flip side would be using sales tax funds to in place of the general fund. So you're still certifying the same resolution to the auditor.
No, I don't think so. It doesn't sound the same to me. All I'm saying is there any way, as we look at Commissioner Dreehouse's idea and we submit to the auditor, is there any way Vice President Reese's, not just idea, option of sales tax could be submitted to the auditor? And I'm not saying I support it or anything, but she brings up a good point that options should be considered. And I hear you saying, Jeff, that administration and the bond counsel considered hers. I'm just asking, can it be considered by the auditor?
So and let me take one more stab at this. So if Commissioner Reese was saying, I want to use a specific amount of sales tax to offset the levy costs,
Right.
then we could say, okay, then that's going to mean still X in the amount of property tax levy we're going to need, and we could certify that then to the then we could certify that to the auditors.
And I heard her say, I'm not speaking for her, she's not saying the total amount. I'm not hearing that. Is there any way we could use any of the sales tax? So is that an option?
That would be the key, though. We would need, for the auditor to certify, we need that revenue number and then the number of years. So that would be the math of trying to figure out what amount that would be, what would be the sales tax fund, and then what would we be asking for the taxpayers on the levy portion to be able to ask the auditor to certify that amount and do that calculation.
Back there, did he want to add on or anything? John? No, you're hiding behind the pillar.
No, I would just reiterate that. I mean, any of the options that are using general fund dollars would work the same way, except you would be using sales tax dollars instead of general fund.
I just don't want to say that we didn't. Obviously, we considered it because a lot of work was done as it relates to that. But if the process is to submit to the auditor, then follow the same process is what I'm thinking.
Right, and the idea is to submit to the auditor a range of where the property tax might land. How we're going to fill the rest of the gap is not an auditor certification, and whether we fill that gap with sales tax or general fund or something else doesn't require any additional action.
I understand that because I can remember when I first came in 19 and our budget was not balanced. And the process we did, we asked all three commissioners if they would give $10,000 out of their salary, and we did. So that wasn't something that's normal either. So
You didn't have to ask the auditor.
yeah, you're right. Well, that's true. Yeah. Now, who's gonna?
Can I say something on that?
Just clarifying, because the amount that we're requesting from the auditor is not, it doesn't take into account how we make up for the remainder. So if we're coming in at 39%, irregardless of how we come up with the remainder, whether it's through sales tax or whether it's through the general fund or whatever it is, that is not what we would be considering. We're just coming in at an amount to secure the property tax at that amount for a certain period of time, in this case 4 years, but then the other options are something different, right?
I understand that completely. My thing is let's just be sure to consider everything. And when we look at it, it may be there's no way or whatever, or there's too much money to make up, whatever. I just want to go in and do it because if it was my option, I would like for it to be considered and not outside of the same process we're using for this.
I think to that end, if there is an amount different than the $116 million, then we can take that and ask the auditor to certify that amount, hopefully in advance of Thursday, so we could do a resolution to be voted on if necessary, because for that to be considered, we have to have that auditor's certificate request.
And we have multiple other options as well that we could potentially fit in.
Yeah, but they didn't come in. No, multiple other ones, like from who? Well, we know this, yeah.
Right, but I'm saying you could fill the gap
All of
on
those
those
have
with
a
sales
certificate.
tax versus general fund. So
Okay, I'm not going to be, because it's,
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I'm just saying, you all, I gave to Mr. Ludo, sat down with him. Now, I'm not, that's y'all. Y'all supposed to get on the pens and the calculators and all of that. That's your job. Not my job to go do your job. Now, I just told you what I wanted to look at. Just like with the Bengals, we ain't sitting down writing the stuff. Y'all writing it. You bring in the lawyers, you bring in your bond people, and y'all write it. So don't come when it comes to me. You want me with a staff of 2, and now I got to do your job. I got to write it. I got to come up with it. I got to balance it. Now, we got to have some respect. Y'all work for the commissioners. I requested a long time ago, before I even went public with it, to look into it because I want to get the increase down. I really want the levy to be flat. Oh, that's my goal, it's flat. Now, what can we get that can add to that? Is it 10% over here that we have and 20% over? But that's not my job. Y'all was in here working on Sunday on this stuff. This ain't my job. And once I give it to you, you don't give me an assignment. It want me to get, I got a staff of 2. Y'all got a whole administration. I gave you the idea. I said what percentage I want to get to. So I would hope after the day we're going to adjourn, I want to hold everybody up. But when I show up, all of a sudden it switches. Commissioner Reese now has to do your job. I got to put the pen, I got to get the calculator, no. I said what percentage I'm trying to stay within. And it ain't 70%. It ain't 50%. Really, I want 0%. But is there something we can do, maybe can add to it, to bring the cost down on the taxpayer? That's what I'm trying to do. Bring the cost down, is real simple, on the taxpayer. So I don't know who I went to Mr. Ludo, and he will make the assignments on who got to do it.
Commissioner, if I could, so Commissioner, you have said 79% is too high, or 70% is too high, 50% is too high.
Not 79%. I hope we didn't go 70.
Yeah, the number.
Yeah. Can we bring it down?
Yeah. So what Lisa is saying is we typically need a number to understand what you're. So you said I gave you a percentage. We really haven't received a percentage.
No, I gave you a percentage. Yes,
No,
I did. I
no,
said I don't want. I told you.
What?
I'll be honest. I told you 72% way too high.
Correct.
50% way too high.
Correct.
40% way too high. I
Okay.
told you get down to 10 to 20%, if that. And you said, okay, I'm gonna take it back and see.
No,
what
no,
we can
no.
do. Not on this, but we'll see what is there. So I just don't understand why it's so difficult.
And we have an
Like I
option,
said,
and we have an option before you that is less than 50%, less than 40%. Then the
got
question.
anything at 10?
No, we don't, because we weren't asked for
Flat?
that. We have a flat.
Flat.
Yes, we have a
We
flat.
got a flat.
Commissioner.
Okay.
flat will be a
But
tragedy.
I'm just looking at where we
do have it
fund
prepared.
I'm just looking at other places we can fund it.
And I
So I'm not gonna hold you up, but
And-
when they come to me saying, Commissioner, you got to do this and you got to do that, I said, well, dang, I got to put in my resume for another job. for something bigger salary, because I ain't the people that's got all these contracts that we paying every day. We paying a bunch of people on that sales tax for the Bengals. Come back with something. Everything I come back with, you say it's illegal. Then you say, well, if we got a cash flow problem, we got a cash flow problem. We can't fund this children's levy, is what I'm saying.
Can I clarify the cash flow issue?
Yeah.
Because this is not a cash flow issue. Cash flow means you have the money, but it's going to take some time to bring it in. This is a we don't have the money issue. This is not a cash flow issue. This is a budget deficit. I want to be clear about that.
Yeah, and so, Commissioner, if I could just,
Well, we're going to adjourn. I'm going to adjourn myself from this conversation because we done got out of line and out of control, and I don't want it to go that way. So I'm going to have to, I said what I said. That's what I'm looking for. And I would hope to have the same consideration as my colleagues. Thank
Well,
you.
I have some final comments. My final comments, just want to make it clear, I know my priority is children, and I believe the board's priority are children. It's no doubt about that. And so I'm glad that we had our public hearings. If anybody wants to call in on Thursday, they can call in or they can come in. We have comments on Thursday. I do know that we do need an increase in the levy. A flat levy will not do it. And also I know, and this is, that if we have mixed messages as it relates to this levy, it will not pass, period, point, period. So I'm not saying we always have to agree on everything. And even if we have, and everybody has a right to abstain and don't even vote for it, but the people are looking for us to see what's the best way to go. And if they think there's another way and we have some money in the closet somewhere, or we have money we can take from stadiums, they're not going to vote for it. And it would be a tragedy for our children not to get this levy passed, and with an increase. A flat levy is not going to do it. So that's all I have to say. Yes,
make just one final comment. I just want to just note that the analysis the administration did say that while the stadium sales tax was not the prudent place to take these dollars, that over the course of the years, the board, and then it's been this board that has exercised prudent financial management enough so that we have some one-time dollars that we can put towards this levy in order to buy down the cost of it to the taxpayer over several years. And that will do, I think, while we may be arguing about what pot of money it comes from, it will do at the end of the day what the board is looking for, and that is to draw down the cost of the levy to the taxpayer on a year-to-year basis while we can structurally look at resizing options. And so I just wanted to say at the end of the day, I think this is a creative approach. It is something that the board has, through its prudent financial management, has enabled, and it puts us in a pretty good place to do something that otherwise we wouldn't be able to do for the benefit of the taxpayer. And I just wanted to say that as well.
I appreciate that. Commissioner Driehaus.
Just a quick comment, because I actually heard some common ground here today when it comes to what we're paying the voters, and that is going as low as we can to make sure that we're being, as you say, prudent by way of what we're asking the taxpayers to do, and then looking elsewhere for the money that would make up the gap. And that's the question at hand, is where do we look for that additional money? And we've got different ideas about that, all of which are creative ideas. I mean, we have not gone down this road in the past, to my knowledge, when it comes to levies. We've never thought about, oh, we'll go down as low as we can possibly go and then try to find some money elsewhere to fund some of those services. So this is a very different approach. And it's in recognition that the taxpayers are stressed right now, and we're all trying to respond to that. So where we get those additional dollars is a question that is a policy question that we need to keep talking about. But in front of us will be what we're putting on the ballot in November, and that is not the same question. That is something that I feel like maybe we agree on. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but I felt like we were getting closer on that. So regardless, looking forward to more conversation on Thursday and then the vote on Monday. But I appreciate the conversation here this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Okay, we have one additional item, executive session pursuant to ORC section 121.22 G2 to discuss the sale and or acquisition of property. Is there a motion? I make the motion.
I'm going to second.
Okay,
Commissioner Summer Dumas?
Yes.
Commissioner Dreehouse?
Yes.
thank you.